Hey, if you're new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me, and honestly, it'd make my day. If you already did, thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, if you like listening to fan fiction, check out my other channel. The link's in the description. Oncoming Storm by Nox 1909. If you once had everything you wanted in your grasps, but then lose it all in the next second, what would you do when a demon shows up and said to you, "I will let you fix all your mistakes, but great sacrifices will be made"? Of course you'd say yes, which is exactly what Luffy had done. Follow him and someone new as he alter his life and relive as a girl? Adios.
He was wearing that cheeky grin on her face as she rested her chin on his broad shoulders. After all these years, Ace still couldn't help the heat flowing to his cheeks. "Bye, Ace. Gonna miss you," she said with an adorable pout. Ace didn't want to admit, like how much he didn't want to admit he was actually Tsunere. But the girl had become pretty. Her black silky hair was trimmed short and neat, work of Mary, of course, secured from going wild by a bright yellow headband. Her big doe eyes glimmer like crystal and always had that pureness to it. She had become, no matter how much she denies it, a lady. Her body had become beautifully curved and her features were beginning to turn feminine. "Oh, come on, Lou, aren't you gonna hug me too? You're making Ace blush because of special treatment." Sabo, who was stationed in a similar boat which was facing another direction, teased. He was still dressed in his similar blue tailcoat and pants, the new white tie now in place of the old, tattered one. Luffy tottered over to Sabo, the little pout still on her face. She did the same to him, a hug, then the words of, "We'll be missing." Mary came out from the woods, leapt off the cliff and landed on the golden sandy beach with a light thud. He came over. Each had holding a small traveling bag. Throwing the orange one to Ace and stuffing the other one into Sabo's hands, he spoke in an imposing voice, "You're my brothers and I trained you so you'll be big, alright? Or no, when I go out to sea with Luffy, I'll hunt you guys down." That was totally terrifying. The look of Mary's face made him look like he was about to murder someone. Ace and Sabo swallowed the lump of fear in their throats and nodded in unison. The image of Mary hunting them down was even worse than a tag game with Garp. Being chased by Mary must be even worse than being chased by the worst pirate hunter. And this statement was proven real by the experience Sabo and Ace had training with Mary each day over the course of the years. Seeing the terrified face of his two brothers, Mary knew that his message had gotten through to them. He stepped closer and fixed their clothes, gently like a mother fixing her son's clothes before he left for college. "I prepared your toothpastes, spare clothing, canned food, just in case you guys get hungry, and a photo book for memories in those bags. Try not to lose them." He smiled and took a step back, a proud look on his face. "So, how are the new clothes I made for you?" "They're great. They fit perfectly. As expected of Mary," Sabo complimented, looking over his suit one last time. Ace snorted, receiving a glare from Mary. He was annoyed. No matter how much he tried to say he doesn't need to wear a shirt, Mary still had to force it on him. The raven-haired boy was clothed with an unbuttoned black t-shirt, dark denim shorts and boots. Placed on his head was an orange that seemed to fit the boy perfectly. "If you don't like, I won't mind taking the clothes back, all of them, including that beloved hat I gave to you on your 16th birthday. Then you can sail to the seas naked. That way, your name will be known throughout the world much faster," Mary said with a smirk, his palm holding out teasingly. Ace grumbled like an annoyed child and turned his back. Sabo chuckled. He reached out his hand and ruffled his little sister's hair. "We'll be leaving now." "I'll miss you guys too," he said with a mellow smile, a sad glint in his eyes. Mary turned to him, an assuring look on his face. Sabo nodded to Ace before kicking off, heading south. The coal-haired boy smiled a kind smile that rarely ever decorated his face and followed Sabo's example, heading north. They turned around in unison. "Towards romance, we head, and if we meet again, I'll be a member of the Revolutionary Army, fending against the cursed blood of this world. I will record my adventures and become a man famous for his words of poetry," Sabo announced. The eloquent man bowed low after taking off his hat, allowing his curly, dirty blonde hair to flow in the salty wind. "Here, we temporary bid farewell. And I will become a name that will be known in everyone's mind. I will engrave my era on every book in this world and will prove to everyone that Portgas d'Ace has existed," Ace shouted, looking up towards the blue sky. Mary couldn't help but let a small smile of pride sneak onto his lips. Luffy grinned at her brothers as they turned into the tiny dots in the horizon. A silent tear of sadness and pride ran down her cheek. It was a great day for all of them, but one day, someone after tomorrow, when their dreams are all accomplished, this day will be a beautiful memory that will be much more precious than any treasure or jewel. 3 years later, come on. The villagers are waiting for us. The black-haired girl dragged her brother downhill. She was slightly shorter than girls her age, but it was no doubt she was uniquely pretty. She wore a bright unbuttoned bright red vest that lay atop of the sun-yellow cropped tank top and a pair of blue, loose jeans that reached half her thighs. A pair of sandals worn on her feet. Her iconic straw hat safely strapped to the leather belt around her hips. She was speeding on the muddy track when she lost her balance and slipped. She rolled down the slope, pulling the silver-haired boy along with her. "Oomph!" Luffy landed on the lap of her brother, Mary, and uttered with a cheeky grin, "That was fun." "It was not. I'm not amused, Luffy," Mary said, trying to sit up. He wiped away the blotches of mud that had managed to dirty his beloved lavender bowler hat. He grabbed Luffy and placed her to a side, then stood up and wiped away the stray murky brown dirt that was sticking to his white pants and light purple trench coat. "Hey, let's do that again." Luffy jumped to her feet and said excitedly. She didn't even bother to clean her clothes. Before allowing her brother to reply, she grabbed onto his gloved hands and decided to climb up the hill, again. "Oi, Luffy. We can't do that again. We have to leave now. They even prepared to boat for us," Mary said as he yanked his hand out of her grip. Luffy turned to the awaiting villagers and scratched the back of her neck with a shy grin. "Come on, let's go." Luffy grabbed his hand again and pulled him across the village. Mary watched as the multiple windmills whizzed through his view. He had already felt a sense of nostalgia. The villagers waved at them from afar, whistles, cheers, cries echoed through the warm air. They opened up a pathway as the two siblings whizzed past them and landed on the boat, splashing gallons of water on the people as the fishing raft churned wildly. It was an important day for all of them. It was the day that Luffy left for her journey. Mary unsheathed his rapier, letting the black blade gleam in the light, then sliced down, cutting the rope that held the boat from floating away from the coast. "Goodbye everyone. When we meet again, I will become the pirate queen." Luffy bounced up and down on the boat, waving to her friends and family. Just so you know, with 2 people, the raft was extremely cramped. There was also the barrel of fruits that Makino had given to the 2 out of care and the supplies they prepared. Seeing Luffy jump around, making the small boat nearly flip, Mary just wanted to kick her off. If he had remembered correctly, in the last life, they had done this once before. Luffy was supposed to jump into the water to test out the sea-resistant ability that Mary had given her, but in the end, Mary was the one who was in the water. Mary secured his hat with his hand, careful to not let it slip off. He used the other hand to hold the bouncy girl down. "Stop jumping, you're going to flip the boat," he ordered in a stern voice. Luffy stuck out her tongue as if saying, "Oops," then sat down next to her brother. They rowed the boat across sea, breaking its calm surface and disappearing into the horizon. "I'm surely going to miss those 2. Makino said, her hands on her hips. She had been taking care of Luffy since the girl was that day when Garp barged into her newly made bar, carrying a little ball of sunshine in his arms. It made her smile. Missing and all, the next time we see their face, it's going to be on a bounty poster. They're going to ruin this town's reputation," Mayor Whoop Slap spat out. He tottered forward to stand next to Makino. Despite all his grumbling, everyone in town knew how much he cared for the children. That day 3 years ago when Ace and Sabo left without saying a word, he threw a tantrum for not informing him. Luffy sat her back against Mary, while the boy controlled the water towards the nearest ship so they could hitch a ride. Since the boat was too weak to support them, Luffy would continuously pick a fruit out from the barrel and finish it with 1 bite. "Stop eating, if you continue, we'll run out of food before we reach the ship." "But I'm bored," Luffy whined, chomping down on another pear. Mary shook his head but continued either way. Suddenly, feeling a presence underneath, Mary stopped the water stream, making the boat shake. The blue surface broke open, revealing a gigantic eel-like sea king in a shade of green. Luffy looked up from her meal and waved at the Lord of the Coast. "Hey, thanks again." The beast bowed its head low and spoke in its hardly understandable raspy tone. "It is my honor to serve you, the escort. And this must be your guide. I've seen that water power before." He indicated to Mary. The silver-haired boy bowed in return. "I thank you for guiding me here 8 years ago. Your service had been a great help. As I am here for one last bit of farewell before you leave for your journey, I must hope you best on your road to success." The Sea King spoke its prayers and ducked back into the water, creating a wave to push the raft forward. Mary smiled and took his hat off as a greeting, and Luffy waved with a grin. Today is a great day. A day that will be remembered in history as the day the Pirate Queen begins her journey once again. But this time, she left in hope of losing less than what she had sacrificed before, for this time, she will be stronger. Today is a new beginning, a new start. Today is the new romance dawn, sailing winds of change. Damn, I missed again. The cry echoed through the warm summer air. It was a very calm day indeed, as the medium-sized cruise ship floated across the water's surface, breaking it into 2 thin streams of white waves. It was the kind of day that was perfect for sailing and listening to the seagulls' cries mixed with the salty breezes. "Batter out," the sailor teased his comrade, for he had missed the barrel again. They had seen the barrel floated out of the whirlpool and decided to fish it up for a good drink. After all, it was quite decent in size. "What the hell was that? You suck," another sailor who was supposed to man the crow's nest shouted, watching the other two amusedly. But then a strange sound echoed lightly through the air, only slightly audible, but it was still caught by his ears. He turned around, staring intently at the source of the echo, and there it was. The pink ship adorned with hearts and a black flag. It was the Jolly Roger of the Alvida pirates, who currently making a ruckus in the area. He looked down below, seeing his 2 co-workers danced off with a barrel that they supposed was full of wine. He shouted, "Ship sighted off the starboard bow. It has a pirate flag on the mast." The 2 other immediately dropped the barrel, pure fear embedded on their faces. The other man continued, "It's a pirate ship. We're under attack." The cannons exploded, releasing screens of black smoke into the air. With no way to defend or offend, the cruise ship veered to its side, only to be stopped by a cannonball. The ship churned under the force of the artificial waves, making the passengers wobble with lack of balance. The 2 sailors banged into the ballroom, shouting, "Captain, it's a pirate raid." "What?" the man with the captain hat and sunglasses exclaimed. He knew that in order to avoid the whirlpool, they did enter pirates' domain, but to be attacked so early, he didn't expect it at all. "Everyone, please remain calm, please remain calm." His words reached none of them as they scattered away from the ballroom and onto deck. All of them too worried about their lives to be aware of the young orange-haired lady standing at her spot, smirking deviously like she had just won a jackpot. On the opposing ship, the people scrambled from above deck to under, filling and refilling the cannons continuously as the captain screamed her commands, "Fire." The woman had a stout stature that obviously didn't complement her overweighted body. She wore a big rimmed white hat over her long black curly locks, had a rain of freckles over her face that made her beady eyes even smaller. She wore makeup, but it probably made her look even uglier. A blue captain coat and pink colors clothing hung over her body. In conclusion, Alvida was not the prettiest woman on the seas, inside or out. She shouted with her crude voice, "Kobe." "Why yes, madam," the pink-haired boy was prompted ahead by the other pirates. He answered hesitantly, his voice stuttering uncontrollably. A hand reached up unconsciously to scratch the back of his head. The captain continued, "Who is the prettiest woman on the seas?" "Not her, of course. But if one was in the same situation as the other boy, flattery would work better than an insult, correct?" Gulping down his fear, the boy managed to get the words out of his throat. Of course, it is out be beloved Alvida Sama." The woman let out a loud, despicable laugh. It was a bad sound to the ear. Expectedly, she slammed down her spike mace and grinned disgustingly. "Well said." Thank you very much." Kobe let out a nervous chuckle, his voice as light as feather. A pirate underling spoke, Alvida-sama, it's been while since our last plunder. Yeah. Now, bring us up alongside it, she commanded. The ship with the swan masthead caught the wind, speeding up considerably. It shot another cannonball into the air. The iron ball collapsed with the mast of the cruise ship, breaking it in two, causing even more panic to the passengers on deck. Of course, none of the pirates or the passengers was aware of the mysterious barrel rolling into the kitchen or the orange-haired woman running across the panicked ship. The pink-colored ship parked alongside the other. Though it was only 1/4 the size of its opponent, the pirate ship was much more armed. The underlings swung over, onto the cruiser, all working under the commands of the female captain. She shouted vigorously. All right, boys. Show them the wrath of the female pirate captain, Iron Club Alvida. The pirates roared as they landed on deck, raiding every single penny from every corner. Later on, Kobe was thrown onto the ship, face first onto the ground, then Alvida followed, jumping on deck and pretty much broke the floor with her weight. While the pirates were threatening the riders, a young orange-haired girl with long wavy orange hair and beautiful, bright hazel eyes was walking along the hallways sneakily. She waited until no one was in sight and took off the gown she was wearing, revealing a pair of denim jeans and a bikini top. She wore a dark gray belt that had a belly sign on it and at its side hung 3 metal sticks painted in blue. She climbed out of the lower floor and onto deck. Using one of the ropes their pirates left behind, she swung aboard the other ship with ease like she had done it so many times before. To her surprise, all the men left on the ship were all beaten and tied to the mast. Greetings, young miss. A voice echoed from above. The girl looked up, noticing a young man about her age sitting on the railing of the crow's nest. He had a pretty face, oddly, with big ever-changing violet eyes that had a mysterious and devious glint in them. A high and slim nose and thin, pale lips. He smiled at her. One thing she found odd about the man, she couldn't read him at all. He landed next to her swiftly, took off his lavender bowler hat and bowed, his silvery white hair fluttering in the warm breeze. He stood up straight, wiped away the dust on his purple coat and smiled at her. Have you seen my sister anywhere? She has black hair, is rather short and has a very dynamic personality. She also has a straw hat with her at all times. Now then, that was weird. This gentleman was searching for his sister on a pirate ship. Why would he think his sister is on a pirate ship? Was she kidnapped? Nami shook her head anyways. She pointed over to the opposing cruise ship and said, maybe you can find her there. Nami was going to suggest her guiding him over when a gigantic figure flew through the air between the two. Their eyes followed as the fat woman landed into the fishing boat resting on the water's surface and broke it into pieces, then turned to the human-shaped hole on the hull of the cruise ship. That was my ride to the next island, Nami thought as she stared at the ruins of the wooden raft. After a while of shocked silence, Nami diverted her attention from her broken fishing boat and turned to the other man, about to tell him to not go onto the cruise ship and warn him about the pirates. But before she could say anything, he waved her goodbye and disappeared, literally. The next moment, he was on the other ship, walking across its deck and into the floor underneath. Did he teleported? No way. She waved the thought away and told herself she still had some work to do. Now then, where is the treasury on this ship? She rubbed her hand together as her eyes turned into belly signs. A moment earlier, keep your shirts on, I'll smash this open right now. The biggest pirate of the three said as he cracked his knuckles. Kobe had just found them the perfect barrel of wine to drink from and he was going to keep it a secret from the captain. At least that kid was not useless. He raised his fist, then let it descend from above, aiming straight at the lid of the barrel. But before it could reach contact, the lid cracked apart and a young girl appeared from inside, her fists raised in the air, hitting the buff man square in the chin. She looked like one of those clowns who would pop up into good nap. The conscious three were left with their butts on the ground, utter shock on their faces. The other one, the unfortunate one, who reached contact with the girl's fist, was on the ground, knocked out cold. The girl looked around for a second before asking, "What's this? Who are you guys?" "Who are you?" The pirates shouted in her face, but she remained unfazed. She pulled her body out of the barrel and indicated to the man on the ground, "He'll catch a cold if he stays there." "It was your fault." The other pirates shouted comically, but she-girl continued walking across the room nonchalantly like it was her house she was at. She only stopped when a blade was raised in her path. "You brat! You should know better than to mess with pirates," the tattooed man threatened, his comrade who was behind him nodding in agreement. The girl didn't care. She took her hand and swiped the sword aside, then she walked straight to Kobe and asked him where the food was. "Listen to what people say," the two pirates said with irritation, only to be ignored by the mysterious, "Can you call her that?" Girl, again. They raised their blades and slammed it down onto the girl, shouting for her to die along the way. Kobe paled, ducking cowardly, hands over his eyes in fright. He didn't want to see someone die in front of him. What he didn't expect was for the two pirates to scream in fear as the sound of metal breaking echoed through the air. Out of curiosity, Kobe opened his eyes. The figure of the girl stood tall over him. She was still alive and breathing. In contrary to her healthy form, the two pirates were pale blue, looking at their broken blades with their wide eyes. Kobe wouldn't be surprised if they were to take out the eyes from their sockets and rub them clean before putting it on again, because the look on their face was full of doubt. Maybe they think this was only a dream. "What did you do that for?" the black-haired girl asked, not even aware of the situation she was in. No, she was aware, she just didn't care. They were all weaklings anyways. "Who are you?" the tattooed pirate managed to ask, shock still imbued in his voice. The girl turned around, a confident grin on her face like she knew the fact was going to be true one day. I am Monkey D. Luffy, the woman who will be the pirate queen. Nice to meet you." But before she could continue, the two pirates ran off with their unconscious comrade dragged in their arms. Luffy stared at them questioningly, arms crossed over her chest. She pouted, leaned her head to a side and said disappointingly, "What's their problem?" Kobe stood behind her, eyes wide. What just happened?" He rubbed his eyes again before jumping to his feet. "You have to run. They're going to come back with more people soon." The girl only shrugged before rummaging through the room again. Kobe followed behind her like a tail, looking over her shoulder occasionally to see what she was doing. Not really understanding her actions, he asked, "Luffy-san, what are you doing?" "I'm hungry." She answered like she was not on a ship being attacked by pirates at all. Her nose picked up the familiar scent of food and she made her way to the storage room, ignoring the boy with bubble-gum-colored hair that was clinging onto her arm. Luffy shook him off and began to run around the room, cheering as she ate anything she could find. "We should be safe here, maybe," Kobe said worriedly as he closed the door. He turned to Luffy, the nervous look still in his eyes. "I'm Kobe. You said your name is Luffy, right?" The young girl turned around, an apple still hanging in the middle on her teeth. She swallowed it down and nodded with a grin. Only then did Kobe notice how pretty she was with her big doe eyes and her button nose. Her uneven jet black hair secured by a yellow headband, though it didn't help much with the unkemptness, and she had a childish scar under her left eye that complemented her naughty look. She was gorgeously curved. Luffy had an unbuttoned red vest wrapped around her body and underneath, you could see a yellow tank top. She wore a belt around her hips that carried a straw hat and was dressed with a pair of denim shorts that reached half her thigh. Only when Luffy threw an apple at his head did Kobe realize he was staring. He stuttered as his cheeks grew red. Luffy-san, are you really aiming to be the pirate queen?" "Of course," Luffy answered without hesitation. Kobe's face paled and he shouted his chorus, "Impossible! Impossible! Impossible! Impossible!" Another apple hit him square in the face. Kobe clutched his broken nose and asked, "Why did you do that?" "Just because," Luffy said, chomping down on another apple. "Then, do you have a crew?" Kobe asked. It was highly possible though. Why would a captain float on the seas in a barrel if he already has a crew? Luffy thought for a moment then said proudly, "I have a first mate." Kobe's jaw nearly hit the ground. "One? Uh-huh." The girl nodded like it was a normal thing to claim to be the ruler of the seas with only one crewmate. But before Kobe could break out in his signature chorus again, Luffy announced, "It's not about being impossible or not, it's about your will in succeeding your dream. I do it because I have the will to do it. If I die while I do it, I'll die. Don't tell me it's impossible because I'll never know if I don't try. Who said I can't own everything in the world? Who said I can't own one piece?" Kobe looked at her with awe. He had never thought about it that way before. Luffy turned to him with a grin. "Are you a pirate?" Do you have a dream? Even though she already knew the answer, she still wanted to ask it. She wanted to hear the story of how the Fleet Admiral Kobe started his dream, again. Kobe regained his senses and answered, I am not a pirate. He said glumly. I accidentally climbed on the rowboat of the pirates and was forced to work as their slave for 2 years. Do you think I can be like that too? Be ready to die for my dream? Can I become a marine? A marine? Luffy faked. The pink-haired boy nodded, raising his fist into the air. Yes. I've always dreamed of capturing murderous villains. Can I do it? He asked one last time for assurance. Luffy sat down next to the door, put her hat on her head and nodded with a smile. This time around, she was certain Kobe would become one of the greatest marines of all time. Kobe nearly jumped out of the room with joy. He pumped his fist and announced, I'll do it. I'll leave this life as a slave and become a marine, and first of all, I'll catch Alvida-sama no, I'll catch Alvida. But before he could continue any longer, the ceiling of the room cracked and crashed down, releasing a cloud of black dust and splinters into the air. A raspy voice spoke, giving shivers down Kobe's spine as he scooted away. So, you're going to join him and catch who? Kobe. The boy stood at the corner, shaking like a mouse hunted by a cat. Seeing Kobe's helpless situation, Luffy planned to jump forward and aid him, but she was stopped by the blades piercing through the wall behind her. Alvida rested her mace onto her shoulder, looked up at Luffy and said with a grin, You're not the pirate hunter Zoro. Zoro, that name, Luffy had heard it before. Somewhere, somewhen in her last life. He was someone close to her because when that name was mentioned, her head ached of sorrow and regret. He must have been one of her nakama, but she couldn't make him out fully. She could only remember the glint of his blades. What was his personality? What he looked like? She couldn't get it out of her head. Alvida continued, Kobe. The boy jolted at the call of his name, his life force nearly oozing out from his squeak. Who is the most beautiful woman on the seas? The pirate captain asked. But before Kobe could even stutter, Luffy interrupted. Not you, of course. The last time I checked, which was about 20 years ago if counting her last life, it was Hancock, wasn't it? The sound of jaws banging against the ground was even louder than the cannons that were. Bina was drowned in silence of utter shock. Alvida's eye twitched, she roared as she raised her mace into the air and slammed it down. The moment the club reached contact with Luffy's head, it broke into pieces. Such a weak weapon, which was only used for looks, when in contact with haki would definitely break. Luffy raised her fist and slammed it against the shocked woman's ribs, sending her flying through the hull and into the rows of emergency boats hanging at the side of the ship, then watched as she flew across the air and into the water on the other side of the pirate ship next to them. Luffy peeked through the Alvida-shaped hole and saw Mary on the deck of the other ship. She was about to wave at him when he disappeared from his spot. Luffy! The voice called at the door of the storage room. Luffy turned around and cheered. Mary? She just didn't notice the slight angry in her brother's voice. Mary came forward and pulled her cheeks with his hockey-imbued gloved hands. How many times do I have to tell you to not wander off? And here you are causing trouble, again. You just to climb into that barrel when I told you. I could handle a little whirlpool. Shori. Luffy muffled through squished cheeks. She looked like a guilty child being scolded at by her parents. Kobe stared at the two, looked at Mary then at Luffy. He scooted closer and asked, his hand pointing at them, is that your first mate? MHN. Luffy nodded in agreement, caressing her swollen cheeks. Kobe thought for a moment, like evaluating the pros and cons of the next question, then asked, are you guys a couple? No, the other two said in unison. Luffy looked as naive as ever while Mary looked as if he was about to kill someone. The smile on his face made him look even more deadly. Mary explained, we're brothers and sisters, by bond. Oh, okay, Kobe didn't dare ask on, seeing the look on Mary's face. The silver-haired teenager looked around for a moment before hopping onto deck through the hole Alvida had made. Then, following closely behind him was Luffy with Kobe in her arms. Mary looked north and announced, the Marines are coming soon, we better hurry. But I destroyed all the rowboats, Luffy stated, slightly puffing out her chest. Don't be so proud about it. Mary glared at her coldly, though he didn't expect anything less from Luffy anyways. He looked at the broken cruise ship then back at the pirate ship. After that, he turned to the frozen pirates in the background and asked, I'll be taking your ship, Do you mind? Of course. This question was only for politeness. The fact was obvious the moment you look at his face, since it completely said, "I'll take your ship, and if you retort, I'll leave you here as a present for the Marines." Who could say no? Seeing that the pirates had come to an agreement, Merry climbed onto one of the ropes and walked over to the other ship with ease. He flicked his hand and Alvida was shot onto deck from the ocean, a puddle of splintered seawater surrounding her. Merry turned around to Luffy, who had just entered the pirate ship, and asked her, "Where do you want to go next?" Huh? Luffy looked up. She was already struggling to climb onto the swan masthead. She grinned as she stood on its neck and swung around on it like a hyperactive monkey. Then, she clambered her way to the head and sat on top of the wooden swan's forehead. She spun around to face Merry before announcing, "I want to go to Zoro." "Why so?" Merry asked. He wouldn't ask Luffy to not approach the pirate hunter, of course, because, after all, nothing could stop Luffy once she had decided on something. Luffy turned around and stared at the ocean. Merry would remember that in their past life, whenever Luffy looked at the ocean, he would be thinking about his nakama. Merry chuckled. He didn't need an answer anymore, he already knew it. "You think he's one of your nakama?" Luffy didn't answer. The silver-haired boy shook his head before turning to the crew, who was trying to get all the seawater out of Alvida's lungs. They were picking out the one who should do the CPR for the woman through a game of Gen Con Pon, rock paper scissors. When she suddenly sat up and coughed the liquid out, the entire crew nearly had their heart jumped out of their chest. They screamed, "Sea Captain! Captain! Do something! They took over our ship!" One of the men said, pointing towards Merry and Luffy, but retreated the moment he saw the teenager's threatening face. That was when the door opened and Nami came out with a giant sack of treasure. The orange-haired woman smiled awkwardly before turning around and going back into the room she came from. "That nearly scared me to death," she exclaimed to herself, trying to calm her own heartbeat. A few shouts and screams echoed from behind the door she was leaning on, then stopped abruptly. Wondering what happened, Nami peeked outside. To her utmost surprised, the silver-haired boy from earlier was standing next to a bunch of tied bandits, wiping his hands together as if he had just finished a laboring job. "Oh, young miss, to think we would meet again in this situation. Can you help us navigate towards the closest marine base?" he asked, turning to her with a smile. Nami was taken aback. How did he know she was a navigator? Reading her like she was a book. He pointed towards the compass and maps strapped to her belt. He was unexpectedly observant. "Both of us don't want to be caught by Marines, and your boat was destroyed, indirectly, by my little sister, so how about we work together temporarily?" He persuaded her, pointing towards the girl on the masthead as if to introduce her. He raised a hand towards Nami, indicating her to shake it. Though hesitant, Nami still shook it. After all, it was the best option. No matter how mysterious and dangerous the duo looked, it felt like the best choice to be their ally. Nami looked into his eyes and said, "I am Nami, nice to work with you." "I am Merry, thank you for agreeing to my suggestion, Nami-san." The silver-haired teen tugged his sister's vest and called her away from her thoughts. She smiled at Nami and introduced, "Monkey D. Luffy, nice to meet you." Well, Nami guessed that working with these people wouldn't be that bad, right? A few hours later, go straight ahead for a few more hours and you'll reach the base. Nami said one last time to Merry, who nodded, and waved her goodbye. They had managed to ask the shipwrights to fix her fishing boat, and now, Nami was ready to leave. Though, she couldn't say that she hadn't gotten slightly attached to them. Luffy was always happy-go-lucky, but she was very easy to talk to, and Merry is nice and kind. Just a little bit of a worry-wart though. She took off the line and set her boat adrift. "I hope to see you again, Nami-san." Merry said, a kind smile on his face. It was weird how many variations of smiles Merry owned, but Nami found it interesting to watch. The orange-haired girl didn't reply. She only smiled awkwardly. She didn't want to meet them again. She didn't want them to know she was a tool of Arlong, the man who destroyed her childhood. Nami paddled off and into the horizon. Merry stared at the navigator, who seemed like she was dissipating into the setting sun. He waited until she was completely out of sight, then turned to Luffy. "Are you sure she's one of them too?" "Yeah." Luffy nodded, climbing of the masthead. "I guess we'll know the truth when we meet her again. If she really is one of your nakama, then we're bound to cross path again," Merry said, crossing his arms over his chest. He and Luffy walked over to the door where the bounded pirates were kept. Mary turned to his sister and asked one last time, "Are you sure about this?" "Definitely, if in my last life, I let them die because we were outnumbered, then in this life we'll need more people." Luffy nodded. It was not like her to think like this, but she wanted to keep them safe, her nakama. Mary shook his head but continued into the conference room where the pirates were kept hostage. He crouched down in front of the Capelvita's mouth tape, announcing, "I am the peacemaker of the Straw Hat Pirates, Mary. I wish to have a negotiation with the captain of the Alvida Pirates." "What do you want?" she spat out angrily. Mary smiled irritatingly and said in an unusually calm voice, "No need to be so rude, madam. One can be pretty either outside or inside, but ones who are categorized as neither are the ugliest." "Are you saying I'm ugly?" Alvida asked in fury. "I am, and I am going to give you another choice. You can stay the ugly person you are now, or I can tell you the way to be truly pretty, both inside and outside," Mary suggested, his words unbelievably convincing. "How?" She leaned forward, suddenly interested in the matter. "Do you want to stay a pirate?" She looked at him with doubt, then asked, "Are you telling me that stop being a pirate would make me prettier?" "No, there are different types of pirates, not all of them raid and steal. You can find treasure, going on adventures on the seas, and you'll still be called a pirate. I want you to be that kind of pirate, with us." Mary indicated to him and Luffy. "You want me to work under you reckless bunch?" This deal had suddenly seemed impossible to accept. She doesn't want to be known as the nice Alvida who works under Straw Hat Luffy. It didn't sound tempting enough. "I'll also tell you the way to make yourself look pretty outwardly." Alvida thought for a moment. She could be pretty Alvida-sama, the goddess of the sea, who works under Straw Hat Luffy, the woman who will become the pirate queen, right? Though looking rather glum, she nodded, "Fine. We'll keep this alliance a secret, of course. We don't want the Marines to chase after us, right? I and my captain will give you guys training routines every day so you can survive in the Grand Line, and when we reach the Twin Capes, we will divert our paths. You will swear your loyalty to us, and whenever we call you, you must reach us in a span of 2 days. Do we have a deal?" Mary reached over and cut Alvida's ropes. He stood up and showed out his palm. She clasped her hand against it and shook it as a sign to say they had come to a deal. He went to untie all of the other pirates, then led them to the map on the conference table. "Now then, we're heading to Shell's Town." The sentence was interrupted by a bunch of rowdy pirates shrieking in fear. Mary hissed while shooting them a glare. He proceeded to pointing at a small island next to Shell's Town. "I haven't finished yet. I want you guys to hide behind this stray, inhabited island and wait until we return with Zoro." "Zoro?" The unison scream nearly destroyed Mary's eardrums. They began to panic again. "Alvida-sama, why did you follow this crew? They're crazy. We're going to get killed." One of them groveled on the ground, screaming in agony. "Stop making such a fuss about it, we're just going to recruit him," Mary said, sighing at their overreaction, looking as if it was totally normal for pirates to try and recruit a pirate hunter. "He's a monster," they all said in unison, and Kobe was with them now. They continued, "He'll turn you over. We're going to be killed." The pirates, plus Kobe, clammed up in the corner of the conference room where Mary had locked them, a dark cloud of depression hovering over their heads. "Stop brooding. Once Luffy's decided on something, no one can change his mind." Mary heaved another sigh before picking all the navigation tools off the table and left the room nonchalantly. He didn't want to deal with a bunch of cowardly pirates, plus Marine to be. "We're dead." The pirates sung their last hopeless cry as they hugged each other in their arms, sobbing in fear of losing their lives. It was going to be a rough day tomorrow. "Omake Nami's good side, Mary. We've finished fixing your boat. You can leave now, Nami-san." "Nami? Oh, thank you." Picked up the bag of treasure and went to the door. Are you guys pirate thieves too? Or bounty hunters, perhaps?" Mary shook his head. "No, we're travelers." Nami hesitantly, "Then, you'll need some money, right?" Mary: "Oh, of course we do." Nami: "Then, I'll leave half of the treasures with you." Mary: "You don't have to, Nami-san." Nami: "It was part of your work capturing and securing the pirates, so I'll give you half the money." Mary: "No, it's okay." Nami: "Take it." Mary backs away. "You better keep it to yourself. I'm afraid that if I take it, you'll come and hunt me down later on. Nami. Why is that so? Eyes in belly shape, mouth drooling, a menacing air around her. Mary. A mirror would explain more than I would. Realizes something, then reach into his shirt pocket, and I'll give this to you as a thank you for guiding us. Pulls out a gem. Nami. I can't accept that. Mary. Just take it. Nami. I want to thank you. Don't give this to me. Mouth drooling even more, hands reaching out to the gem. Mary. Your body says otherwise, Nami-san. Smile awkwardly. Nami. I can't take it, Mary. Then I guess I'll give it to someone else. Putting the gem back into his pocket. Nami. Pounce forward, then grab the gem. I appreciate your kindness. Grinning greedily while hugging the gem and bag of treasure. Eyes in belly signs left the room with all the treasure. Mary. Sigh, she's so easy to read. Kobe. Walked into the room. You are very persuasive, Mary-san. Mary. I am the peacemaker after all. Kobe. You lied to her and bribed her with money. Mary. I told her fractions of the truth and thanked her with a present. Was any of that wrong? Kobe. I give. Mary. I only wanted to be on her good side. Shrugged, then left the room. Oxygen monofluoride truths and variations. Listen to me, Kobe shouted as he pounced around like a rabid dog barking at a tree. Whatever exotic dance he was doing, it did not catch Mary's attention, not even remotely. Zoro's going to kill you guys. He's not safe. Of course he's not. He's being held captive by the Marines. Mary answered with a thoughtful tone, his leather book hiding the ever so slightly smirk on his lips. Hearing the words, Kobe grinned cheerfully and sighed in relief as he thought. So some sense had actually gotten into Mary. You get what I mean, right, Mary-san? He's behind bars. Yes, and that's why he's not safe. They can harm him in any way they want to. Mary said, the grin growing wider. At first, hearing the words, Kobe was confused. It was until he heard the continuation of the sentence did he realize, Mary was. Don't worry, Kobe, he'll be safe when we rescue him. Toying with me. Mary-san. Don't toy with me, Kobe shouted irritatingly as he bounced up and down again, rocking the cramped fishing boat from side to side. Mary chuckled lightly before raising a hand up as if signaling Kobe to stop. Calm down, you'll wake Luffy. He pointed to the figure sitting cross-legged on top of the boat's head, snoring peacefully. It's been a long while, but Kobe couldn't help wondering why Luffy hasn't fallen off the boat while sitting in such a position. How could she stay like that despite all the ruckus happening on this boat? Reading Kobe like an open book, Mary answered serenely, who knows what keeps Luffy balanced? And the ruckus created on this boat was because of you, and you're overreacting anyways. I'm not overreacting, I'm being logical, something that you lack right now, Kobe shouted out desperately, only to receive another dismissive shrug from Mary. The pink-haired boy slumped with depression as he had nearly lost all hope in winning over Mary in the discussion. Then, with disheartened expression, he turned to his bowler hat-adorned friend and asked quietly, so keeping Luffy asleep is more important than me trying to get you out of this situation alive? Well, not really, Mary answered after a pause, causing Kobe to perk up suddenly, the determination resurfacing in his eyes. Keeping away from having to fish and deal with craziness is more important. A dispirited sigh escaped Kobe's mouth as he collapsed onto the boat's wooden seat. I can't get you guys out of this, can't I? Well, that is true. If you somehow, miraculously, manage to get me into opposing this plan, I still won't be able to get Luffy out of it anyways. So, you're just wasting your time on a lot of useless effort. Mary stated bluntly, mentally hitting a hammer at Kobe's face. The subject to the non-sugar-coated words was brought to all four limbs as he cried his eyes out from frustration. How could he possibly deal with such nonsense any further? God knows. Stop making such a fuss about it, Mary reassured calmly, though the words did not comfort Kobe in any manner. He continued, Luffy is just here to see if Zoro is a good guy or not. If he is a good guy, we'll take him in. If he's not, we'll just drop you at the Marine base and leave peacefully. But I guarantee nothing when it comes to being peaceful with Luffy around. Hee hee. Kobe chuckled silently as he pushed up his circular lenses. Spoken truthfully, Mary-san. Nothing could be pacified with Luffy-san around. Though, I still advise you not to go. It is quite obvious that the pirate hunter is a bad guy. Many people had even called him a demon in human form. It is a good thing he is under the surveillance of the Marines. It was said that he killed people without a batting of his eye. His face darkened as his voice took a turn for grimness. But I find most of the Marines' words highly doubtable. Mary recoiled calmly, though there a hidden hint of fury in his tone, as he laid down the book he was holding. He turned to look at Kobe in the eyes, suddenly making the air heavy and dark. You might think I am lying, and it's most likely so, for I am a pirate. But Marines aren't what you think they are. The world government has been hiding many things from its so-called citizens, and it would break many like you if you know why. The world is never what you expect it to be, Kobe. The words Mary had spoken did not have the carefree air it usually carried, but this time, it was dark and cautious and freezing. For the first time seeing Mary drop his impenetrable emotional wall, Kobe had known that this matter was something important. But what did he mean? I don't understand, Mary-san. Why are you telling me this? The rapier wielder gave him a sorrowful smile before turning away. He uttered after a long, thoughtful pause, as if he was reminiscing of something that happened a long time ago somewhere far away. A fair warning for the near future. Mary dropped the distress expression before trailing off slowly. His shown emotions became artificial and unreadable again as he turned his back to face the island ascending at the horizon. Take your time to think about what I said, Kobe. We're about to arrive at the place where you'll know the truth of my words. Many unexpected events are going to bomb your life. The silent answer was enough proof for Mary to know that Kobe was taking his words with caution. The boy will be a great individual one day. If warning him of the truth earlier in his life was not going to help in any way, it was better than experiencing it firsthand in unexpectance. The boat stayed silent for the next half an hour as they flowed across the sea's sparkling surface. Mary had refused to pick up his book again as he had suddenly lost interest in it. It was no means interesting when compared to what that was about to happen in his life. He must plan ahead, prepare for the changes Luffy wanted to make to this life, because Luffy's brain is nowhere near acceptable in the category of major planning. There was only, do it when you think it, when Luffy is involved. He turned to look at the bright blue skies as he revised the things he needed to stay cautious about through the journey in East Blue. If Luffy had told him correctly in the past life, there was a man named Kuro of 1,000 Plans in Syrup Village where had gotten his first ship, the Going Merry. There was also a man named Don Krieg at the Bharati where he got his cook, Black Leg, Sanji. Cat burglar, Nami lived in Kokoyashi with her sister Najiko and was forced to work under Arlong pirates, which means there is a high chance of her betraying us after we recruit her. Yeah, he noted the fact mentally before continuing. Usopp was mentioned in the story of Going Merry, so it means he must be from Syrup Village. And Sogeking is obviously Usopp. That's probably it, huh? Some of the pirates we'll fight will probably be good allies in the future, so let's whip up some way to convince them. I'll have to ask the twins for information about those pirates, of course. He wasn't allowed to say any of these things to Luffy because of the no spoiler rule. Mary nodded firmly before standing up, but then shook his head lightly. He didn't really change compared to his last life. He had always been diverting his thoughts so that he doesn't need to worry about the negative feelings hidden in his heart. Always running away from himself, hiding from his true feelings. It was at that moment that the boat drifted onto shore, churning roughly and knocking Luffy face first into the paved roads at the docks. Kobe laughed quietly at the comical sight before standing up with a sigh, then anchoring the raft. Though he was slightly more active than before, a visible air of uncertainty still surrounded him. Humph! The little boy puffed as a palm suddenly slammed his back, forcing him to stand up straight. He whipped around frantically only to face the encouraging smile Mary was flashing him. He chuckled nervously. It seems like Mary had seen through his hidden frustration. Well, there was no means in hiding it anyways. Mary always has his way and Kobe doesn't even know it. Eri glared at the mumbling Luffy for a few seconds. Then he sighed as he shook his head slightly before crouching down and prompting his sister, "Come on, Luffy, we need to go." Goo, wait a minute Makino. I still want to eat Moa. She cut off mid-sentence as she snored loudly, her hands flailing like she was reaching for something. Then the raven-head girl suddenly sat up. My meat. There was an awkward moment of silence as the raven-haired girl looked around and realized where she was. Then, she grinned dopily, scratching the back of her head, making a few tick marks appear on Mary's forehead. Still, he couldn't bring himself to get angry at his forever, airheaded, sister. Luffy, then, the other two sighed while shaking their heads simultaneously, though in quite different tone of voice. Merry stood up. An annoyed smirk appeared on his face only for it to disappear immediately the next second. The young teen stepped off the boat while stretching all the way. Following closely behind him was Kobe. "Oh no, you're not going anywhere, Luffy," Merry warned before grabbing her hand, looking straight into the eyes of the young girl which had the words, "Explore, explore, explore," shining from it. But then seeing the stern look on her brother's face, Luffy frowned like a child revoked of permission to eat sweets. The three treaded through the market, stares of curiosity burning into their backs. This town was not unfamiliar with travelers, they get merchants every day. But these three had a different air to them, and the Jolly Roger of the Alvida pirates was on their sail was a big proof to it. Oh, but it's not like the citizens are worried about themselves. No, they wouldn't worry over a three-people band of pirates. What could a trio possibly do? The problem is that if they are pirates, they must have known about Morgan, right? Why would they come here? They would get killed. And didn't they hear of the arrival of Zoro and his partner? This town has something off about it. Merry spoke up, breaking the silence between the three. Luffy's eyes brightened as she nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, I agree, she cheered. They totally lack meat in this market. Merry narrowed his eyes slightly, and then loosened up again, looking as if he was holding back the urge to hit the girl. That's not what I meant. Maybe it's because of Zoro, Kobe said thoughtfully, freaking out the crowd. Merry smirked, interested in the people's reaction while Luffy tried holding back her laughter, and failing. She grinned. It seems like Zoro is a taboo word here. The crowd shrieked again. Captain Morgan is in charge of this base. Merry paused in order for the crowd to scream and back away. Why don't we pay him a visit? An evil smile made its way onto his lips, but no one was able to catch it. He grabbed onto the other two's hand and they disappeared together. Oh God, Kobe said, his eyes spinning in circles as he lay down his food from the last 24 hours. The sight was disgusting, honestly, as he stumbled on his feet and clenched on his stomach. I don't feel so well. Obviously, Merry said without a care as he inspected the fortress's outer walls. He was only using pace 2, and Kobe's already hurling up everything. Now it's clearly obvious how terrible Kobe's resistance is. I mean, the first time I used pace 2 on Luffy, he didn't even flinch. Kobe, you seriously need training. Merry-san, Blair, could you not compare me to Luffy-san? She's as thick-skinned as an ox. Kobe muttered out weakly as he tried to keep his lunch down. What did you do to me anyways? We were just at the market a second ago and, how come we're already here? Did you teleport us? Luffy and Merry both gave him a flat look as if he had just lost something in the brain. Kobe, don't be stupid. I can't teleport, obviously. It's something called immediate acceleration. The name explains everything already. Can we continue now? Immediate acceleration? Kobe mumbled to himself. So that was why Merry-san suddenly appeared on the ship. He moves so fast that most eyes cannot catch. That is so cool and useful for combat. He had never seen Luffy fight with her devil fruit powers before, but she must be powerful too. He must become as powerful as them one day. A Marine's rank is also based on their combat ability, after all. To be able to own a base like Morgan does, the officer must be strong. Now that I think about it, why did the people freak out when Merry-san said Captain Morgan's name? Have you thought through my warnings, Kobe? Merry said, turning around to glance at Kobe through the corner of his eye. Then, seeing the boy exhale in realization, did he turn back to inspecting the base's gates as he whispered, exactly. Anyway, what are you looking for? Kobe asked curiously. The more important question right now is where my sister is. Merry said flatly as he removed his touch from the outer walls. What? Hey guys! I found Zoro, Luffy shouted, her voice coming from the left of where the other two stood. She waved her hand in the air excitedly as she pointed towards the inner yards of the base. Merry smiled amusingly before appearing next to where Luffy sat on the wall, his hand holding a cup of tea. Oh, it really is him, he muttered to himself before sipping down on the cup. What do you mean? He can't be here. He must be in some underground or something. Kobe lost his voice as he saw the lone figure tied to the wooden cross at the middle of the field. Why is he here? He shouldn't be in public. Zoro should be in a cell, right? The reason to why he is tied there, we will know later. Mary answered cryptically, a well-hidden amusement mixed in his tone. Then, the trio directed their gaze back towards the figure far in the distant, presented under the scorching hot sun. He was dressed in a loose, dark green kimono that slightly revealed his toned chest, like it was showing something that was not there, or will be there. A bandana, colored with a shade of coal-like fern green, tied above his forehead, covering his leafy-looking hair. Though tied down, the pirate hunter still had an intimidating air surrounding him that made people want to turn their back and run. But that doesn't mean the aura had affected Mary or Luffy in any possibly way. Well, except for making Luffy especially jumpy and piquing Mary's peculiar interest. "We should untie him," Luffy announced sternly before moving to jump off the wall. "No, impossible. 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 You can't possibly ask a pirate hunter to join a pirate crew then expecting him to agree. If we untie him then he'll kill us straight away. We should not untie him, impossible," Kobe said with shaken finality, waving his hands in the air like he was doing some exotic dance as cold sweat broke on his skin. "Sad as it is, I'll have to agree with Kobe," Mary said uncaringly, making Kobe sigh in relief. Though, the next words said would hit into him like a nail. "If we untie him now, we don't know what the Marines would do to him. He is unarmed after all." "What?" Kobe shouted with a mixture of shock and frustration. "Mary, stop toying with me. You keep doing that. Making me hopeful and then diminishing it the next second. I don't know what you're talking about. After all, it is your fault for not listening until I finish the sentence," Mary said, taking the cup to his lips to hide the undoubtedly growing smirk onto his face. But, Mary-san," Kobe stuttered discouragingly, then he turned to the place where Luffy used to stand before sighing pleadingly, clearly asking for help. "Luffy-san. Where's Luffy-san?" Then he shouted again, facing with a foreign face instead of his overexcited pirate queen to befriend. "Who are you?" Mary chuckled lightly before using his spare hand to push up Kobe's dangling jaw, humanly impossibly open due to overshocking. She's been there for quite a while now and Luffy's currently with Zoro and Rika. "Rika who?" Kobe said again, his jaw, again, as he shouted. "Rika her." Mary pointed, indicating at the little girl who was hitting it off with Luffy. The two were playing a game of tag with each other, running across the field as if they were not trespassers at all. Kobe looked at the scene with a visibly growing sweat drop on the back of his head. Then, the bubble-gum-haired turned to the woman next to him. She was about the same age as Luffy, only a year or two older. She had a white-sheathed sword, her family treasure, the Wado Ichimonji, stashed on the silvery gray belt around her hips. A loose man-styled kimono wrapped around her body, over the black-colored breastband on her chest. She had uneven bangs that fitted her tomboy look perfectly in the neck length, dark blue mane of hair left that was tied up into a messy tail. She looked like one who came from the samurai country, Wano, but it was not quite the same. If the way they dressed were anything to go by, Kobe'd say Zoro and the woman were very close. The stranger skimmed Kobe with a sharp eye before grabbing and shaking him hand politely. "Greeting, nice to meet you, my name is Kuina." Nice to meet you too," he said hesitantly before free his hand from the loosening grip of the woman. Man, she had such a firm hold for someone who looks as frail as her. But before he could say anything more, the door to the yard opened and walking in was a very unpleasant-looking man. He had a long face, bob-cut blonde hair, a huge butt chin and tiny droopy eyes. The man looked as if he was the king of the world, arrogant and ignorant. The type of person that Luffy despised. "Ah, another weirdo," Luffy shouted out before she suddenly disappeared along with Rika. Kobe pried out his eyes to look for the two but they were nowhere to be seen on the yard. "I was sure there were more people on yard," Helmeppo managed to mumble out, his eyes nearly falling out of its sockets. He was so sure he saw at least two more people on the field. Where could they have possibly gone to? "Sir, it must be a trick of the light," one of his subordinates spoke up. Of course I know it's a trick of the light. Why you don't have to tell me. Now step back," Helmeppo barked in return, his face looking up arrogantly again as he approached Zoro, all but unaware of the three at the further corner of the yard. "Shush. Mary hushed as he covered Luffy's mouth with his palm. Unlike Rika, who had acknowledged the fact that it would be best if she stayed quiet and immobile, Luffy was squirming around like a fish out of water. Mary gritted his teeth as he whispered, "Stop moving, don't make a sound. I'm using stealth on all of us. If you move, it'll break our cover. To them, we're not any different than air, clear?" Oh, Luffy sighed out in realization and relief, but also in a very uncontrolled volume, causing Mary to ram his hand onto her lips again. He threatened with a spine-chilling smirk, "Keep that volume down or I'll crush your vocal cords, Luffy." The said girl scratched the back of her head sheepishly before nodding enthusiastically, an obvious grin making its way onto her lips. "Roger," she answered in a whispery voice, though it was still clearly audible. Mary sighed as he shook his head. He just gave up, officially gave up. Whatever, he doesn't really care if they get caught or not, it won't be a problem breaking out anyways. After rolling his eyes for one last time, he turned towards the people in the center of the courtyard again. "Roronoa Zoro, it seems like you're still as lively as ever." Helmeppo spoke as he played with his shirt collar. "Hello to you too, bastard," Zoro answered, his eyes narrowing into a sharp glare. Hee 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 hee. "You can keep that attitude up, Roronoa, but nothing will change. I admire your stubbornness, but you'll die out eventually, hee hee hee. I'll survive the entire month." "Well, do your best. You won't be able to keep that attitude up forever," he said haughtily, twirling his ringed fingers in the air to signal the guard he is going to leave. "Only 10 more days, Helmeppo. That is, if you live that long, hee 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 hee." The young master walked away, laughing his head off arrogantly before turning around toward where Kuina and Kobe were on the wall and shouting, "You two don't want to violate my father's rules, do you? You better not have anything to do with Roronoa Zoro or you'll be executed, hee 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 hee." "Of course not." Kuina lied through her teeth, not even flinching. "We're just here to take a look at the notorious pirate hunter." Though in her mind, she was enraged, she had learned to control her emotion over the long years of being a swordswoman. It is a fault for a warrior to show her emotions in a fight. Kobe waited until the man was out of sight be asking worriedly, "Why are they doing such a thing?" "What do you mean?" Kuina wondered quietly as she turned to the boy next to her. "Why would the son of Marine publicly humiliate a criminal? Isn't he supposed to only be allowed outside when an execution is happening? Isn't he just abusing his powers?" Kobe said as he gritted his teeth and clenched his hands. "This isn't what Marines should be like." "Isn't that so?" Mary suddenly spoke from behind the wall, catching the other's attention. "Now you understand what I mean, right, Kobe? It won't be easy to get rid of people like him in the Marines alone, so I want your help. One day, you will be big, and when that time comes, I want you to cleanse the Marines, make them what they stand for. Just and responsible. One day, I would want you to protect all that you can when no one can do it. I want you to be a good man, Kobe. Don't just be a good Marine." He looked up from his spot where he was leaning on the wall and smiled at the boy. A true, sincere smile full of trust and belief. Though the smile had a certain incomprehensible weight to it. "Kuina, I hope that you could bring Rika, Kobe and Luffy to a restaurant or inn of some kind and please help me keep them out of trouble. Thank you. And I apologize for making you an acquaintance, do me favor," he said before disappearing again, now allowing Kuina to reply to the request. What the blue-black-haired woman managed to stutter out. Kobe eyed her sympathetically before patting her shoulder lightly. I know. They're both unreasonable, aren't they?" he said flatly. Mary tread through the Marine's empty halls nonchalantly as if it was his own home. After all, there was no one there. Most of the people had gone out to help Morgan carry his statue into the base through the inhabitant space at the west of the island. Marine bases weren't and never will be Mary's place to come to. It was always cramped and at every corner you turned to, there would be a wall. He despised walls. It reminded him of his prison, Area 51. And he's already gotten enough Marine base visits for a lifetime. Ace had once asked him why he occasionally goes somewhere for about a day or then returns. The reason was because of Garp, who would pull him onto one of his expeditions without his agreement. Of course, he didn't tell this to Ace or Sabo or even Luffy and just shrugged it off. He suddenly stopped at a huge wooden office door and glanced over it. Nice interior design, high quality wood. The room that has the view to the entire town. This is the room. He opened the door and activated his stealth as a caution before stepping in quietly. "I am." Great, low raspy voice boomed as if the fact was absolutely true. "Yes." The subordinate straightened up his back and saluted, though he could name 3,000 reasons to why that statement was wrong. "That is correct, Captain Morgan." "But there hasn't as much tribute to me lately," Morgan said. Mary scoffed under his breath as he walked away from the door and headed towards the portrait of Morgan at the furthest left of the room. He was correct after all. Morgan would stay in his office and wait instead of help his men with the statue. What an annoying man. If he truly is great, then what kind of person would Sengoku be? God. He chuckled to himself as he sat down at the right time to begin his plan. "Well," the Marine officer spoke up again, though his voice was slightly shaky, "the people only have enough money after all." "That is not the problem," Morgan boomed again. "The problem is that the people do not enough respect for me, isn't that right?" Tap 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 tap. The frantic footsteps echoed from the halls, catching the individuals in the room to turn their head. Suddenly, Helmeppo trashed through the office's door, tears running down his cheeks. "Father, there are some people I want to kill," Helmeppo said with a high-pitched voice. His hand clutched on his left cheek and the other holding an ice pack to a certain private spot on his body. "Captain, your statue is here," another Marine officer barged in and announced. Ignoring his son, Morgan went out of his desk and left the room, Helmeppo following behind his like an unwanted tail. Mary waited until they were no longer in sight, then dropped his stealth. Click, clack. The sound resonated throughout the room as the portrait next to him opened. A certain familiar girl with bright orange hair stepped out with a roll of parchment in her hand, bumping straight into Mary as she exited. "Ow!" she hissed as she rubbed the spot on her forehead where she had collided with him. "Ah! You're—" she managed to shout out before her hand shot up to cover her mouth. She glanced around for a second, checking if anyone other than Mary had noticed, before whispering, "Mary, what are you doing here?" "Didn't I tell you we'll be going to Shell's Town?" Mary answered nonchalantly, offering his hand to help her up on her spot. "You did, but you never told me you'll go into the base. What are you doing here anyways?" "Some investigation for Garp." "Garp? The Marine hero? I thought you said you aren't in the Marines." She wondered, her hand reaching out to grab his. But then recoiled, realizing she had just stolen from Marines. "I'm not a Marine, Nami. I don't lie. Well, not when I'm not needed to," he said before grabbing her hand forcefully and pulling her up. "Well, whatever it is you're doing and why you're doing it is none of my business," she said as she wiped away the dust on her jeans, trying to act uninterested. She really didn't need to care about him or Luffy. All she should pay attention to nowadays is making enough money to get away from Arlong's grasps. And really, that fact is not worth mentioning to any other person. When doing a job involving con and tricks, never get emotionally attached to anyone. "Then, goodbye, Nami. Hope to see you again," Mary said before climbing into the gigantic safe behind the picture. He dug through the multiple piles of paperwork, looking for that piece of receipt that would bring Morgan to his doom. "Where is it?" "What are you looking for, Mary?" Not being able to hold down her curiosity, Nami blurted out. "Something. Why haven't you left yet?" Mary said as he skimmed through another dough pack. "I was just curious," Nami said before sitting down on the rim of the safe, staring at Mary, who had picked up a pink little piece of paper and raised it into the air. "There it is," he thought as he put the receipt into one of his jacket's pocket. "Now where is the other one?" He rampaged through the piles of paper again. Creak, the door to the office suddenly opened, startling Nami. She scrambled in and closed the safe's door instinctively. "Nami, oh God, that startled me." What did you say, Mary?" she said as she sighed in relief, her hand over her chest in attempt to slow down her hammering heart. "You just locked us in," Mary finished his sentence, a sweat drop growing on the back of his head. "Oh shit," she mumbled out. It didn't take long for her to figure out what he meant. She had been stealing for pretty much all her life and had faced multiple kinds of locks and safe. This one could only be opened from the outside and was soundproof, enabling the two from calling for help. "Well, guess we're stuck here, T," he said calmly before sitting down. "Guess we can relax a bit while we wait for someone to open this thing. And I've already found the doughnuts needed." "Yeah, I guess." Nami sighed before sitting down cross-legged next to him. She had never faced such a scenario when she would be stuck in a safe with someone she never expected to meet again, but whatever. Not like she can't remain calm about something like this. It is much better than being chased around by a huge pirate crew anyways. Mary hummed quietly before turning his head to look at something distant. I wonder what Luffy is doing right now. When earlier at Rika's mother restaurant, Zoro and I were childhood friends and rivals. We both have the same wish and goal. We used to fight each other every day and became close to each other through time. At the age of 17, which was about a year ago, we decided to leave our hometown and travel around. Due to having low budgets while needing money for transportation, we both became bounty hunters. We were called the Windblade Duo. Pirate Hunter Zoro and White Wing Kuina. We've been in that profession for 4 months. She paused to drink a sip of water. We reached Shell's town about 3 weeks ago to get the bounty of this pirate we caught and came to this bar after that. That was when Helmeppo rampaged through town with his new pet, a wild wolf he caught in a hunting trip. It pounced into the restaurant and started eating food for the customers. Then, it turned to attack Rika. I wanted to cut it down, of course, but Zoro acted first. She said, gritting her teeth as if she hated the fact she hadn't acted first. I was so scared. Rika entered the conversation. Then she reached over and placed the food plates in front of the trio. If it wasn't for Zoro Oni-chan, I would have been bitten and my mama's store would have been destroyed. Kuina raised a hand to pat the little girl on the head before continuing. Of course Helmeppo tried to attack Zoro for opposing him and got beaten badly. Then they had to make that stupid bet. She spat out like she had just eaten charcoal. Her eye twitched as she slammed a hand on the table. That stupid idiot just had to be chivalrous and stubborn and now he'll get himself killed. She raised her hands up, cupped it into a circle and shook it in the air like she was imagining strangling Zoro. Before dropping the grip and sighing again. That's about it to the story. Shuhesh mmh kush guy? So he's a good guy? Luffy interrupted and said through stuffed cheeks. None of her words were understandable though. Luffy-san, please swallow before you speak, please. You must remember that Mary is not here to translate for you, Kobe informed. Zoro's a good guy. Luffy cheered again after gulping down her food, her arms stretched in the air excitedly. It was good though, the fact that Zoro was a good guy. It was proof to Luffy that she was not a bad person in her last life because most of the memories she had of her past crew had been fuzzy. It made her unsure of if she was bad or good. Yeah, Kobe answered glumly, I guess you're right. Crash. The sound of china shattering into 1,000 pieces echoed through the air, resonating with Helmeppo's horrid laughter. Then, the despicable man spoke, I'm hungry. And I'm sure we'll all help ourselves to a free meal, am I correct? He lay his legs on the table rudely while grinning like he had everything in his grasps. 2 of his father's men stood guard behind him, trying to hide their annoyed looks and turned away slightly. Helmeppo ordered aloud with an indecent cackle, Hey, hurry and bring some alcohol. He prompted again after a while, Oi, what's taking so long, hurry up. He raised his cup up so one of the men could pour the wine in, and then announced, Since I'm tired of waiting, I've decided to execute Zoro tomorrow. Look forward to it, everyone, hee. Kuina gritted her teeth as she turned to look at Helmeppo with the oathly glare. And judging by the way Luffy had clenched her fist tightly, she'd probably want to do the O as Kuina did. Kick his arrogant ass. And as if something had clicked in both of their mind, the 2 charged forward. It wasn't as if they intend to do it, it was just instinct, a feeling, a sensation, a need they felt. Luffy charged forward and with the full swinging force of her body, slammed her shin straight into Helmeppo's left cheekbone. The man tumbled back, off his seat and onto the ground, grabbing his bleeding nose frantically, a disbelieving look on his face. But before he could stand up properly to rant about his father again, Kuina charged forward and rammed the handle of her Wado Ichimonji into a certain, not worth mentioning, place with enough force to make him unable to recreate. Who are you? Helmeppo said with a high-pitched forced-out voice, his hands clutching onto his breathing organ. I don't care if you're Morgan's son or whatever, but men like you, Luffy said angrily behind gritted teeth. Who could do anything alone and always relies on others, Kuina continued, her hand strapping her sword into her belt. Should have no rights in this world. The 2 shouted imperially, emitting their anger, making Helmeppo quiver in fear. He scrambled up to his feet and waved for his men to follow, and he ran towards the marine base shouting, "I have you for this. You too, I'll get you executed." "Like hell," Kuina shouted after him before a victorious smile made its way to her lips. Peeved, she had Luffy spurted out before laughing like two crazy people, rolling on the ground and clutching their stomachs as they laughed. She. That's ought to give him the memory of a lifetime. "Oh, the world should thank us. He probably won't be able to reproduce anymore." Kuina waved it off. "Now then, I've decided. Kuina, will you join my pirate crew?" Luffy said with her hands rested on her hips pridefully and a bright but determined grin on her face. It was later noon and the sun was frying the earth with its immense heat. Under the scorching waves of hotness, Zoro hung onto the cross with no shade or water to cool himself down and was sweating profoundly. He was quite hungry too, even with the rice ball Rika had given him. After all, a big man needs a big appetite, as he was referring to himself as a man with big ambitions. At times like this, when he wanted nothing more than to free himself of these binds and go for a drink, he would reminiscent to the promises he had made with his sensei of the will and responsibility of men. He promised to not die until he achieved his goal to become the greatest swordsman, and that would mean he would not die anytime soon. He sighed as he thought back to the days when everything was so simple, the days when those dreams hadn't come to him yet. The sound of shuffling feet awakened him from his thought as he looked up and into the clear obsidian eyes of the young teenager. She still had the same messy black curls and the same determined but goofy grin on her face. "Ah, trouble comes again," he thought to himself internally. "You again?" Zoro mumbled tiredly as he looked up to see eye to eye with Luffy. "You have too much free time," he scoffed. "I'm going to untie the ropes and you'll be joining my crew," Luffy announced and demanded, her voice firm with finality. "You're going to become my nakama." "What are you?" "Well, I refuse. I'm not going to bring myself low enough to be a pirate." "How unreasonable," he retorted as he flipped his head away, avoiding eye contact with the other girl. He is already determined to not be tricked again by a woman's beauty. The first time was because of Kuina. The day they left from the island, Kuina had somehow managed to convince him into giving her the Wado Ichimonji while Sensei offered them both the chance to own it. What's so bad about being a pirate? Who says you'll have to pillage, murder and plunder everywhere you go? Well, whatever. I'm going to take you anyways, Luffy said as she stuck out her tongue and ran away. Wait, that sounds wrong, he shouted out as he tried to lean away from the rope's grasps, before realizing what he had just said. Then, he shook his head and shouted again, I mean, that's the wrong way. Oops, Luffy said as she grinned sheepishly. With a dust cloud trailing behind her, she stopped in her tracks then turned 360 degrees around. Then, she stretched out her rubbery arms and shooting herself across the field, shouting, Zoro, I'll return your weapon and you'll be my nakama. What the heck are you? And you, not even going to consider my opinion in this, you bastard. She's not going to listen to you, seaweed head. Kuina spoke up as she landed on the ground with a puff. Then soon, following behind her was Kobe, who had unfortunately fallen face first onto the earth. He stood up slowly before wiping off the dirt on his clothes. Zoro-san, you have to escape. What are you talking about? I'm not going to belittle myself like that, Zoro retorted immediately. Shut up, tree leaves, we're going to bust you out of here sooner or later. That Helmeppo bastard had never intended to keep his end of the deal and had planned to execute you tomorrow. That was why I and Luffy gave him a beating. Luffy's in there with Mary to fight against the Marines and get back your swords. Don't make her waste her efforts on nothing, Kuina informed sternly as she stepped forward, unsheathing her katana. Then, with a swing of the blade, wind exploded through the air, causing dust to flutter off the ground. For a moment after she sheathed her sword, nothing happened, until the ropes suddenly slipped off like rag dolls and hit the earth. Is that so? Zoro mumbled irately, as he flexed his muscles. Well then, let's give them hell, he announced as he glared at the marine base ahead of him menacingly, letting a cold and frightful aura engulf the field. But wait, Kuina suddenly spoke up, disrupting Zoro's psyched-up spirit. You don't have your weapons. Zoro stared at her for a moment, eyes wide and mouth agape before shouting, Damn it, I forgot, he said as he ran off. Where are you going? Kuina shouted irritatingly as she rested her hand on her hip. Getting my swords. That's not the direction of the marine base, you idiot, and Luffy's already gone to get it. I don't trust her. I don't trust your goddamn witless sense of fucking direction. Now come back here. Kuina shouted loudly as she pointed to her feet. This is one of the times when you seriously do not want to mess with her. The times when she had to deal with her partner's ridiculous sense of direction. Yes, ma'am, Zoro said, his spirits now utterly diminished. Inside the base, wah, where is this? Luffy mumbled to herself as she scratched the back of her head furiously. How did I even get out of here last time? I think I shot myself out of the window? She hummed loudly as she stroked her imaginary goatee, her head leaning to a side thoughtfully. Mary told me to go get her in the axe guy's office, but where is that place? A few minutes ago, Luffy had suddenly seen Mary's face appear in a cup of water in Helmeppo's room, telling her to go to Morgan's office and break them out of the safe. But where exactly is Morgan's office? Seriously though, this place is like a maze. How did I even go through this place before? Luffy bit her underlip as she thought intently. Boom. What was that? Luffy whipped her head around to the source of the explosion. Picking up her pace, Luffy ran through narrow and damp corridors, then skid to a stop in front of a gigantic wooden set of doors. Luffy skimmed the ingress quickly with her mouth opened in awe, when finally she noticed the sign atop of the entrance saying, Captain Morgan. I found it, she cheered happily as she bounced around, then jumped through the doorway excitedly. Mary, I found you. What do you mean you found me? Mary said as he turned around, a few visible tick marks on his forehead. Both him and his companion, Nami, were covered in rubble, and underneath their feet lay a dented safe door. On my own. Would you have found me? I was about to give you specific instructions on where to go when you suddenly ran off. Really? Luffy said as she tilted her head to a side innocently. We'll deal with you later. Right now? We have bigger problems to deal with, problems revolving around your soon-to-be first mate. Mary said as he looked out outside the window, his eyes narrowing as if he was glaring at the Marines approaching the three lone figures standing on the field. What's happening? Soon, Luffy and Nami followed Mary to the window. They're surrounded. Mary spelled out the obvious. He reached over and grabbed the three katanas tied to Luffy's back, then opened the window. After I do this, I want you to rocket us out of the window. Aim towards Morgan. Clear? He whispered into Luffy's ear before unsheathing the swords. Outside the base. Where are they? And my swords? Zoro grumbled under his breath as he leered at the army ahead of him. They were all armed with guns. It was Zoro. He might be able to cut all the bullets down, but Kuina's one sword style focuses main on one opponent or one line of trajectory only. She wouldn't be able to slice down all the bullets, and that wouldn't guarantee Kobe's safety. Where was a miracle when he needed them? Thunk. The sound of blade digging into wood rang through the air, catching all of the people's attention. Zoro grinned a bone-chilling grin as he picked up his katana. Thunk, thunk. The sound resonated through the air again as two more blades dug its way into the wooden cross. Zoro looked up and gave Mary an approving smirk, and he returned it with a mocking salute. Morgan stepped into the scene with his usual defiant look. He boomed loudly, Roronoa Zoro, not only have disrespected me in my town once, but are you planning to do it again? Drop your weapon, Befo. He was cut off before he could continue, being thrown off balance by a fury of explosions. Even without Morgan's command, the soldiers pointed their guns at the three and cocked the barrel. And in unison, they sent a few hundred bullets after the trio. Zoro grabbed all of his swords and proceeded into fighting stance. Then, with a twist of his upper half and a swing of his swords, he either diverted the trajectory or cut the bullets on half. Then, as if the two were absolutely in sync, Kuina jumped up, using Zoro's crouching back as a footing, and pounced forward. She quickly unsheathes her katana and swung as she did a somersault in the air, then landed with a light thud behind the soldiers. She sheathed her wado as she stood up, naming Itoryu, the hummingbird's silence. Just a second later, a breeze of wind formed into a shape of a breathtaking pair of wings glided through the air, and all the soldiers slumped to the ground, all having the same cut wound on their body. The woman grinned, "They don't call me White Wing for nothing." And while his soldiers were dropping off like moths on the light, Morgan was troubled. Where did it come from? No one was in front of me a second ago. Morgan stumbled back a few steps before gaining his balance again. Most of the explosions didn't hit. Whoever the person is, and how fast they might doesn't matter if they're inaccurate. Morgan grinned as he swung his axe in the air, only for the blur in front of his face to dodge it skillfully with a backflip and land on the ground lightly. The soldiers instinctively moved aside to avoid the man. You might talk big, Morgan, but you are nothing compared to what lies ahead. The figure spoke, dust clouds surrounding him majestically, covering his body making his blurred away. The smoke began to clear, revealing Mary in his elegant form, one hand securing his bowler hat and covering his face while the other gripped tightly on his black-bladed rapier. He let go of his hat and looked up with a smirk. But, you are nothing against me. His eyes glowed evilly as dark air surrounded his body, dropping the temperature by a few degrees. Get him, Morgan ordered loudly, but before the men could do anything. His body swayed to a side as he readied his blade, making it glimmer, before disappearing into thin air. Morgan leered around, searching for him, but before the Marine captain could react, Mary had already appeared again before him. His body twisted in the air as he pointed the rapier forward towards Morgan, and he announced in a quiet but stern voice, "Flurry." The area exploded with shockwaves, every hit landing squarely on Morgan's chest, pushing him back by a few meters. Morgan clutched his torso as pain bursted through it, but there were no cuts, no blood. Then he suddenly felt a recoil in his body as a flow of hot, velvet liquid came rushing into his mouth, forcing him to cough it out. "What is that weapon?" Morgan queried as he tried to regain his fading consciousness. He swung the axe desperately again, lunging forward, but to his surprise Mary dodged to a side, revealing the stretching fist aiming straight for his face. "Gomu Gomu no, pistol!" Luffy shouted as her fist collided with his face, sending Morgan through the wall and straight into the roads of the town, receiving multiple shocked stares from the citizens passing by. Stop, Helmeppo announced, catching everyone's attention. Don't move or I'll shoot," he announced, his hand holding a gun to Kobe's skull. "Please," Mary spoke up in a dismissive manner as he turned around to look at the young master. "Your father's gone. He's beaten, Helmeppo. You no longer have your privileges and powers. You're hopeless now. If you actually have the bravery to shoot, you would have shot by now, and do you even know how to use pistols?" Helmeppo slightly lowered the gun but then raised it up again, shaking even more intensely. "Oh, of course, I do." "Well, good for you, Kobe, you'll live after all. Nighty-night, Hell. Mep. Po. Sama," Mary said as he waved and turned away. A loud "wud" could be heard, then a thump, as Helmeppo fell into unconsciousness. Zoro stood behind him, holding onto a shivering Kobe and a lifeless Helmeppo. "Oh no, Mary's angry," Luffy said worriedly as she hid behind Nami. "Mary's angry?" Nami asked in return. "He doesn't seem any different from usual, and what is there to be angry for? And is Mary getting in a bad mood a bad thing?" "Yep, Mary's angry." Luffy nodded again. When Mary's angry, her sadist side shows the most clearly. She'd probably pour her anger on the first person in her field of vision. "Welp," Nami said as she turned around and head for the cheering town. "Better leave before we become the target." A few minutes later, screams of agony could be heard through the town. It has been an hour since Morgan's beat-up form had fallen from the hill's top, and the news of his defeat and their freedom has spread through Shell's town. A little group of travelers had become the talk of the place, and currently the four iconic figures were sitting in a self-created restaurant in the middle of the town. Of course, hearing that they were at the bar, the place soon was filled with as many people it could contain. "Ah, I'm stuffed," Luffy shouted as she leaned back on her chair, only for it to break under her weight. "Digest first, Luffy. Digest," Mary instructed silently, his eyes still focused in the book he was reading. "Why does he read so much anyways? He's been reading since his last life. Doesn't he run out of books?" Luffy shook her head dismissively before letting go of the thought. Then, she forced her body to digest and returned to her normal, lean-looking shape. A pro you get when you eat a lot is that you can force yourself to digest, to eat even more. "Isn't Zoro going to eat anything?" Luffy asked nonchalantly, pointing her index finger at the said man. With a groan, Zoro looked up, his face bruised and battered, ice packs held up to his cheeks, forehead and chin. He was, unfortunately, a victim of Mary's anger. Can't feel anything, Zoro mumbled lifelessly. The pain had overlapped the hungry. Kuina reached over to pat his back as she nibbled more of her sandwich. She SW Ali. Well, you'll face more of this. You already agreed to join their crew and I also agreed it because it was part of my deal with Mary. When did you even strike a deal with Mary? Nami asked, her chin leaning on her palm and her eyebrow rose curiously. Well, he suddenly showed up at the tap in front of the bathroom and he told me if he and Luffy were to be able to get Zoro into their side, I'll follow too. I agreed. Kuina said as she took another bite. It's not like the end of the world would happen if I agreed, right? True, true. Nami nodded. What kind of deal did you strike with Mary? The blue-haired woman asked, her sharp eyes looking into Nami's soul. Is it that obvious? Nami sighed with a demotivated expression. I would tell you but I don't want to do it. All you need to know is that, somehow, he got me into becoming you guys' navigator and treasurer. That's all. The two women sighed together, suddenly sympathizing one another for being caught up in Mary's little game. Mary held his teacup to his lips as he hummed with a devious smirk. A deal a day make the game worth a play. Shut it, Nami, Zoro and Kuina roared in unison, and expectedly, Mary didn't even flinch but instead, chuckled lightly as he sipped his Earl Grey. You guys sure are fun. Ririka, Rika's mother, said with a kind smile. Well, so any of you want another share of food? I do. Luffy cheered as she waved her hand in the air. I'll think I can start eating now, Zoro said as he sat straight up on his chair, raising his hand in indication. I wouldn't mind if you could get me one of those chocolate mousse, Mary named as he raised his cup, returning her kind smile with one of his own. Sure, coming right up, Ririka said as she left the room and head into the kitchen. A few minutes later, all the food ordered were taken out and placed on the tables. Still, Mary had apologized for them helping themselves to some food even though Ririka had announced that she'll let them eat for free. Luffy popped another piece of meat into her mouth and chewed it with content before leaning back on her chair happily. Woohoo! Now I have 3 more crewmates. I'm only temporary. Nami cut in, her hand raised in the air. I'll only stay until I get my map back. Well, for now, our biggest goal is still to get to the Grand Line. And to get there, we'll need a map. And I know exactly who to go to get one. Buggy. He's named the Untouchable Buggy, due to his devil's fruit. The Bara Bara no Mi. He can't be cut and could split himself apart to dodge hits. 2 of his top men are Kabaji and Moji. They're both useless so you'll beat them easily if any of us ever get into fights. The Buggy Pirates are currently residing at Organ Islands in a town called Orange Town. That's where we're heading. We'll make an alliance with them in order to have support in tight times. Like Whitebeard for example. Isn't it supposed to be White Mustache though? Luffy thought aloud, chomping on another portion of food. We've already discussed Whitebeard's mustache matter before, right? It's only for namesake, not that it's true. Mary scoffed before continuing. We're trying to not fight them in any possible manner, and I'll try to get him into our alliance as soon as we arrive, okay? They all nodded, including Luffy. So, after we get the map, Nami will replicate it for us and she'll leave. Any arguments? Mary asked one more time for insurance, then loosened as soon as they all nodded again. Can't Nami stay though? Luffy wondered. No, Nami cut in immediately then backed away with a nervous laugh. I have matters to deal with at my hometown so I can't stay for too long out at sea. You know, our place is facing a economic problem so I have to return soon with cash, a lot of cash. You can tell us the truth when you feel like it, Nami. They all said with flat faces while she backed away and laughed sheepishly again. She wouldn't mind telling them, of course. They might actually help her but that's exactly what she doesn't want. These kind-hearted, crazy, idiotic people will get themselves killed if they go against Arlong. Mermen had always had the upper hand when fighting with humans. She sighed inwardly as she waved the subject off. More importantly, she said as she chuckled deviously, let's meet the other crew so I can get my share of treasure. Her eyes turned into belly signs as she twirled around happily. Your ulterior motives are showing. Zoro, Kuina and Mary said in unison, all with the same flat tone. Well, she's already in the money daydream zone. There's no more helping it anymore. Mary sipped off his tea and said with a dismissive shrug. and the other two followed with the same expression while Luffy just stared at them obliviously. "Where's Kobe anyways?" Luffy asked with stuffed cheeks. Clack! The restaurant door clicked open, revealing a unit of marine soldiers marching with their blue-laced uniform and their high-held pride. The man in the middle, who was clearly leading the other, wearing a green-colored tie, stepped forward firmly. Then, he cleared his throat and announced, "Excuse me, but, is it true that you are all pirate? I've already named it clearly in the letter I gave to you. That violet-colored letter. It namely said that I am a pirate working under the soon-to-be pirate queen, Monkey D. Luffy, and also the adoptive grandson of the great Vice Admiral Garp. I would like to suggest him to a few individuals who would be fit for his apprentice criteria while I am on my journey, as I promised him so. And of course my choice is based on experience and it's not biased. I can assure you, if anything I named in the letter goes wrong, I'll know and I'll come and talk to Sengoku-san about it," he said with a warning grim grin. Then he continued, his expression returning to normal. "If you're asking for us to leave because we're pirates, we're obliged to comply." He stood up and signaled the other four to follow, then they all filed out of the room without another word. Despite all of the calls from the townsfolk, telling them not to leave so early and cursing the Marines for forcing their heroes away, they tread through the town silently but pridefully and paused by the docks to look back one last time at the town afar. The citizen joyfully waving at them with bouquets of flower like it was a cheering festival. The sound of cries of support mixing into the calm spring air, mixing with the ear-pleasing sound of the rustling bushes. But somewhere further away, where no one pays attention to, a crowd of merged white and blue stood tall with their chest puffed out in esteemed salute. And of course, there must also be a tearful Kobe. All of the four faced themselves toward the crowd and flashed them a grateful grin as they climbed onto the little boat. Mary gave a mock salute before untying the anchor and they set off into the open sea again, looking for a new adventure. And someone in the future, they know they'll face again with the young and ambitious marine chore boy. It was a beautiful farewell scene, but it's cramped. The four all spoke in unison with the same disappointed tone as they tried to find a comfortable seat on the little dinghy. "Omake Luffy problem Luffy," Mary whines while balancing on the railing. Mary looks up from the book. "What?" Luffy, "I'm bored," pouts. Mary sighs. "Go bother Zoro." Luffy, "Okay," walked across the railing towards Zoro who is snoring peacefully. Zoro yawns and stretches. "What?" Luffy, "I'm bored." Zoro, "I don't know, go bother Mary." Luffy, "But Mary says to go bother you." Zoro grunts. "Then go bother Kuina." Luffy, "Okay." Raised her hand. Kuina, "I'm a dumbbell whizzed by." Kuina, "Don't bother. I'm training." Lifts her weights then turns away. Luffy, "Zoro, she's training." Zoro, "Go bother Nami, I'm going to sleep." Luffy, "She said she's counting treasure and was drooling like dog with rabies," pouts. Zoro, "Talk to Mary about this." Rolls over to avoid Luffy's puppy dog even more while turning around. Mary, a wave shot up from the sea and swept her off the boat. Mary continues reading. Zoro, "Kuina." Luffy, "Glub glub glub drowning." Kuina, frantically, "Go get her." Zoro shot up from his seat. "The hell," jumped off the side of the boat and dived into the water. Mary chuckles. Zoro breaks out of the water carrying a soaked Luffy. Mary, "What?" Lowering the book. Kuina and Zoro, Mary, "I'm innocent." Raises his hands. "I'm hungry," Luffy said as she dangled on the railing of the ship, sticking out her tongue as she stared at the water below yearningly. "We're hungry too," a group of 3 Alvida pirates shouted into her ear angrily. They were sitting on the railing, fishing rods that don't seem to attract any fish in their grips. The 2 crews had been starving for an entire day and no one have had any luck in catching even a scratch of food. Nami started as she pushed herself to her feet with a loud sigh, her hair swaying lightly. "It was your fault after all, Luffy. Who'd expect that you would finish everything in the fridge in 10 freaking minutes?" Her voice abruptly changed into a roar as she pulled the rubber girl's cheek violently. Then, she sighed again as she let it go with a snap and turned to a certain silver-haired young man who was reading a book while leaning against the ship's mast. Nami snarled angrily, and some annoying gray-haired, stone-faced jerk didn't take the consideration to warn me about it. Mary lowered the book enough in order for his eyes to be seen and stared at her unfazedly through the multicolored sunglasses. She could slightly make out the smirk on his lips as he turned to another direction and continued reading. Then, he turned around suddenly and said with a smile, "The hair color's silver, not gray." Nami's eye twitched uncontrollably. "And my hair's red, not orange," she said mockingly before whipping around and shouted with the devil's fangs. "Is he fucking kidding with me? When I signed up for this crew, I didn't sign up to starve to death, you know? Well, he did tell us the food is endangered." Zoro grumbled aloud, naming his presence at the opposite railing of the ship. His eyes were half-lidded, as if he had just awoken for a nap. One of his hands ran through his bright green hair as the other flapped his loose seaweed-colored t-shirt as if trying to push the humid air out. He was obviously affected by the heat. "But it sounded more like a riddle to me," Kuina said with her tongue stuck out slightly. She was lying on a beach bench, tanning herself under the tropical sun unlike her usual fighting uniform, the yukata. Today, she was only wearing a simple white tank top and gray denim shorts, her blue hair draping on her shoulders instead of being tied up. Nami sighed as she narrowed her eyes. Mary is quite the reliable person, but he could be so annoying when he wanted to. Nami looked over the crew one more time. Luffy had expectedly fallen into the water, only to be shot back onto the ship head first by one of Mary's water cannons, laughing like a crazy person all the way through. She sighed as she looked down at the map and compass placed on the coffee table next to her. They should be reaching Orangetown soon enough if they continued at this speed. Then, after that, she'll be done with her deal and will be allowed to leave peacefully. Though, it was not really her thing to leave peacefully. She'd usually betray them before leaving. Why did she feel like she shouldn't do it? No, she couldn't bring herself to do it. They were the first pirate crew who had ever proven to be trustworthy. They were the first people to break open her emotional shield. She couldn't bring herself to get them involved, not matter how strong they are. Maybe they're a bird? Yes, a bird, Nami said and nodded without thinking. Wait, what? Luffy pointed to the sky, making the crew, including Nami, glance up, and they brightened as their eyes caught sight of the arrow-like figure gliding on the sky above. The crew stared at the animal cravingly as they had just found their first source of food. Even from such a distance, it was clearly shown that the bird felt uncomfortable under the bloodthirsty gazes. Its confident flight line slightly faltered as it flew above the ship. "Let's shoot it down," Kodo, who was one of the few decent-looking members of the crew, who doesn't look that much like a thug that Alvida had picked up from the streets, said with a very cruel and unlikely grin on his face. "You'll ruin the meal then," the young captain said as she licked her lips hungrily. "I'll catch it," Luffy announced as she wiped away the drool dripping down from the corners of her mouth. Before anyone could react, she grabbed onto the mast with her right hand and shot herself into the air while shouting, "Gomu Gomu no rocket." No one had registered what happened until they hear the distant scream of a certain orange-haired girl flying away with the spontaneous captain. "Save me!" Nami's shout could be heard shrinking away from the distance. A trail of her tears was left behind when they flew off. When did Luffy even took the time to grab onto the navigator? The crew stared at the scene, their jaws slackening as Luffy hit the bird with much force, throwing the bird off its course and straight into the island far in the distance. It stayed like that for a long time, the entire extended crew silence with shock. It wasn't until Mary shot out of his seat, with a grumble, and started barking out order did they started to move again. "Everyone, unfurl the sails, get the paddles. We're going after them to that island and I don't want to miss a beat. Get it going," he shouted. It was rare to see him shout, but this was urgent problems. He'd want to save that island before Luffy does the impossible and set the entire place on fire. Happened many times before. "I hope she doesn't get into any trouble," Kuina said, fixing her slack jaw while she was at it. Mary scoffed slightly when he heard her, then, he shot Kuina a smug smirk. "The day when trouble and Luffy doesn't come hand in hand is the day the world flares up in eternal flames. That's why he needs us worry warts at his tail to make sure he doesn't end up killing himself before his goal is accomplished." His smirk turned rather fond as he said the words, and Kuina she stared at him along with Zoro, slightly surprised look on their faces. Then, their expression shifted into similar excited and content smiles. "I get what you mean," Zoro said under his breath, the smirk only growing wider. They stayed in a long-winded, calming silence until one of the Alvida pirates who was manning the crow's nest came shouting about 3 pirates demanding the ship to stop and hand over all the treasure they have. It was also said that the little ship that the 3 pirates was on was adorned with the Jolly Roger of Buggy the Clown. Well, Nami would have murdered someone if she heard that someone wanted her treasure, Kuina thought with a scoff. You're blocking our way, Mary said as he looked over the railing with cold eyes and an unreadable smile. Though, he sounded extremely threatening. Don't you know, we are the subordinate of Buggy the Clown, and our captain won't hesitate to kill you with his devil fruit powers? They said, completely ignorant to his subtle warning. Mary clicked his tongue slightly, then peered over his shoulder at the other duo who was starting to approach him out of curiosity. Zoro looked over the handrail with his usual scowl, making the 3 fearless pirates take a slight step back. Then, Kuina followed his example, her sharp eyes glaring at them intimidatingly. Mary chuckled at their taken-aback form. You should know who you're messing with before starting a fight, Buggy Pirate's subordinates. 5 minutes later, hee, the leader of the 3 pirates said as he rubbed his hands together with a stupid smile on their faces. We didn't know this ship was under the custody of the Windblade duo. You all know that we did not mean all the things we've said before, didn't you? Shut up and paddle. We don't have time for your bullshit and we've just lost out navigator and captain. Zoro said, threatening, leaning against the wall of the paddle room, hugging his swords threateningly. He couldn't believe that Mary had just tossed him into the place and told him they were his responsibility like that. Curse that damned devil. To all with his bet and dares and unshakable smiles. Zoro clicked his tongue with 3 pirates visibly jolt in fear. One of the pirates spoke up. Zoro turned around, his sharp glare making them jolt yet again. Well, where are you heading towards anyways? He spoke again, clearly uncomfortable underneath the man's scowl and huge presence. Organ Islands. The 3 pirates' eyes widened, then, smug smiles took over their faces, clearly showing that they think they know something the others didn't know. Well, let's just emphasis on the word, think, here. Zoro spared the 3 another look, then speaking aloud with a smirk. If you think we don't know Buggy is at Organ Islands, then you must be more stupid than you make yourselves to be. Zoro continued, satisfied with the bullet of a sweat bead the other 3 were breaking out in. Our captain has some unfinished business with yours. The trio bit their lips nervously, trying to shut up their frightened cries. What are they planning to do with Captain? It seems that they know a lot about Buggy-sama. What is going to happen to them? Unwilling tears streamed down the 3 pirates' cheeks. Buggy-sama, help us. Kya, Nami shouted as she braced herself for impact. She was free-falling in the air with her stupid, reckless, numbskull captain laughing heartily next to her and a badly bled gigantic bird. Something is seriously wrong with that sentence in her life in general, isn't there? Before anything else could happen, a thin rubbery arm wrapped around her waist and the 3 figures landed onto the little town without a hitch. Damn it, Luffy. Warn me before you do stupid things. You scared the fucking wits out of my heart. Nami shouted as she rammed her fist onto the black-haired captain, making the teenage girl fall face first into the paved road. Even with that, Luffy still laughed. What are you fussing about, Nami? The girl said with a smile. We arrived at Orangetown and also get the bird. No harm done. The way Luffy said was like she was implying that shooting herself of a ship and onto land was one of the most normal things in the world. Well, it was certainly normal for Luffy, anyways. Then why did you bring me with you? Nami said as she rested her hand on her hips, an eyebrow raised expectantly. Because you can cook. Luffy said bluntly. It was simple. She was definitely going to catch the bird and she needed someone to cook it for her, and coincidentally, Nami was the closest person to her who could cook. The answer made Nami's lips twitch violently as her hand constantly formed into a fist then loosened. She sighed and face-palmed. It wasn't worth it. Well, guess I'll just have to look to the positive side. Nami said as she looked around. She didn't have the chance to notice it before, but the town was deserted. There was not even a single shadow of a human around here, though the town still had its breath of life. Well, except for the rows of houses which were seemingly destroyed by some kind of firepower. She's just going to take a wild guess and say that Buggy was responsible for that. Pirate SS. destroying innocent people's houses and driving them out of their own village. Nami bit her lip and dug her nails into her palms. Then, she turned to Luffy. Luffy had no reaction. She was just staring blankly at the destroyed houses. It was so unlike Luffy to be unresponsive, since she was the kind of idiot who shows what she thinks. But, inside, hidden beneath that facade, was a raging anger towards the other captain. How dare he destroy people's home, their treasure, like that? That jerk. If Mary is ever able to convince that man into her crew, she is going to teach him a lesson about pirates and their dreams. She doesn't mind if her allies go hunting for treasure or whatever, but they are never allowed to do reckless destroying, pillaging and murder just because they feel like it. She stooped her hat a little lower to cover her angered eyes. Before Nami could show her concerns over the action, Luffy looked up again, the bright grin returning to its rightful place on her face. Luffy shouted, her hand waving for Nami to come with her after she picked up the unconscious bird. Come on, let's go. I know we're both starving and it's not really likely that any of the people would mind if we borrowed some stuff, right? Nami smiled slightly. At least Luffy's back to her usual idiotic self now. Yeah, let's go. Oh, and what we're going to do is called trespassing and robbery. I'm hungry. Luffy shouted as she sprinted straight into one of the civilians' house, completely ignoring what Nami has just told her about. The orange-haired navigator just sighed again as she followed her temporary captain into the house. It didn't take long before Luffy had begun chowing down on her food like a starved beast, while Nami ate quietly. Suddenly, Luffy looked up, her mouth still full of food. Hey, Nami, what are you going to do after this? It was clearly visible that the navigator was hesitant to answer. She bit her lips slightly, then exhaled. I guess I could tell you a little bit. Luffy swallowed, then dropped her food onto the table, showing that she is going to pay attention. Luffy knew she would never put food down when she was this age, but she knows better now. Her friends are but more precious than meat could ever possibly be. She stared straight into her eyes, making Nami even more tentative. They stayed silent for a few moments, as if waiting for the other to react first. I need 100 million belly to save my village, Nami said, biting on her lip while clenching her hands so tightly that nails had dug into her palms. She had finally said it. It made her chest light, so light she felt like she could float, but then the anxiousness and expectations to the other's reaction had started to weigh down on her again. What if Luffy abandoned her for her debt? What if they don't trust her anymore for keeping quiet from them? Why didn't you just say so then? Luffy asked bluntly, breaking the tense silence. Then, she began chugging herself with food again. We'll help you if you need it, she continued. Even through stuffed lips, it was clear how determined her words were. Nami's mouth was hanging agape, staring at the female captain. It wasn't that simple, it couldn't be that simple. A pirate helping someone without asking for something in return. That must be a lie. Her ears must be tricking her. Her eyes must be blurred by something. Someone couldn't just go and shatter her life view like that. It took a long time before Nami's voice returned and she questioned, her eyes narrowing. Why are you so willing to help then? Why? Luffy asked, dumbstruck. Do I even need a reason? If you want one, then let's just say that it's because you're my friend? She smiled widely at her. A pure smile with no darkness, no hidden reason, no motive. That can't be. It isn't true. Nami could start to feel tears fill up in her eyes. You're lying, the navigator suddenly shouted. Head bowed down in an attempt to hide her crying. You're a pirate and pirates lie. You don't want to help me. You just want to get on my good side so you could use me, Nami said. Though, it was more like she was lying to herself, deluding herself. Luffy suddenly stopped her eating. Then she dropped her food slowly, then looked up, straight into the other girl's eyes. Anger was clearly radiating from her. I don't lie to my friends, she declared, making Nami back away with fear at the sudden action. Nami then collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down her face non-stop no matter how hard she tries to wipe them away. She sobbed to her heart's content, more than she had done for the past 10 years. She couldn't really believe her ears when she heard those words. She didn't really believe there was someone out there who could save her, her town. It was as if this was a dream come true. She wiped away the tears even more profusely and soon her cries were reduced to hiccups. She spoke quietly, "Thank you, Captain." And along with those words were a truthful, Bo money-involved smile that hadn't been shown Esser had passed away. Luffy only grinned at her cheerily before shouting, "Our pleasure. But I'll have to decline you," Nami said with a smile, efficiently stopping the raven head in her tracks. Luffy stared at her comrade with confused and Nami continued. "It's too dangerous." "What do you mean it's too dangerous?" Luffy broke out in anger. "I don't care if it's dangerous. You, our Nakama, needed help and that's all I need to know." "I don't need your help, I'm almost finished with my deal to get 100 million belly." "Then we'll help you collect your money," Luffy insisted, making Nami even more infuriated than she was before, her brows furrowing and her expression shifting to a scowl. "You're going to get yourselves killed," she screeched at the top of her lungs. "I don't care, I won't let myself die yet," Luffy argued back, just as loudly and as strongly as Nami had just been. The orange-haired navigator was frozen as she broke down in tears again. "I don't want you to die," she murmured into her palms as she wiped away her tears again. "I don't want someone precious to me die again." She looked up as she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Then, we promise we won't die," the young captain said with an assuring tone and her trademark wide, sunny grin. It shone on Nami like the fire starting outside the window. "Wait a minute. The fire starting outside the window?" Both Nami and Luffy charged to the windowsill and stared at the scene on the other side of stained glass. The raging flames was burning, dyeing the area around it blood red and deep auburn, like the leaves in fall draped with a scent of gore. The howling of a canine could be heard echoing through the area, a cry of pain and sorrow and lost memories. Nami whipped her head around, towards where her captain was, but the girl was already out of sight. "What the hell? Luffy, where did you go again?" Nami shouted to herself, her easily incensed demeanor returning. She glanced around frantically and soon had found her captain sitting next to the dog which was howling at the burning block of house. Nami took a sprint towards the other girl and stationed next to her. "What are you planning on doing now?" "Huh?" Luffy hummed questioningly, turning her head towards the navigator while she was at it. "Don't, me, I know that blank, faraway look anywhere. What kind of stupid plan did you came up with this time, my captain?" "Ah, it's nothing. I just suddenly want to beat the crap out of some idiot with a weird haircut and his stupid pet cat." Luffy snarled as she cracked her knuckles. A certain man riding on a gigantic feline fell off his seat as his ride suddenly let out an animalistic sneeze and a huge shiver of fright. "Well, that was specific," Nami said as she backed away with an awkward smile. Anger was clear in the young captain's voice, and whatever she was planning to do with those individuals Luffy had named, it was going to be excruciating. Nami looked around. There was nothing much to look at anyways, well, except for the gigantic paw marks left on the ground. "Oi, you kids! What have you done to Cho-Cho?" a gruff, worn-out voice shouted, mixing along with the clinking of metal and wood. The old man with an odd-looking hairstyle waddled towards the two pirates. He stopped and rested his hands on his knees, breathing heavily from the stress his makeshift armor had put on him. He looked like any other normal citizen with circular glasses and creases on his skin that showed how much he had aged. Everything about the man was normal, other than the armor and his furious scowl. "We didn't do anything," Nami said calmly. "Then, how do you explain the bruises and bleeding that Cho-Cho got?" he asked, his voice getting angrier as he raised his fist up threateningly. Though, the gesture did not make either Luffy or Nami or even Cho-Cho scared or taken aback. He was already like that when we saw him. He was probably harmed by one of the buggy pirates, Nami continued, making the man's scowl look even more furious. "Well, it's quite relatable actually, if you look at the damage those pirates had done to his town." "Hey, old man, is this dog's name Cho-Cho?" Luffy asked, her head bent back in an impossible way, a face-splitting grin on her lips and a finger pointing at the injured dog who was observing the conversation quietly. "Yes, his name is Cho-Cho. Then, what's your name?" Luffy asked again. "My name is Boodle. I am the mayor of this town and I refuse to let anyone hurt my people like that," he said, puffing up his chest. Then began charging off towards the direction of the paw prints. "This town is my treasure, our treasure. I won't let them ruin it no matter what. I don't even care if the man I oppose is a notorious pirate." "Wait, old man," Nami shouted, running towards him and pulling him back by the arm. "You can't go, you'll get yourself killed." "I don't care," I need to get Cho Chow's revenge. That man has destroyed his treasure. Everything that he had treasured. I will not, in any way, tolerate myself letting this go, he said as he continued to struggle in the young navigator's grip. She. Luffy suddenly laughed. I like you, old man. Don't you go, she, on me. Come and help me stop him already, you rubber brain idiot. Ignoring Nami entirely, Luffy continued. I'll help you, old man. I'll defeat whoever destroyed Cho Chow's treasure and get Buggy out of your town for you. She stood up and wiped the specks of dust off her pants, a hand reaching out to put her favored straw hat on her head. Are you okay with that? It was silent. Nami had thought that Luffy was kind to help her, but she would also help an unknown man in an unknown town just like that. This idiot never ceases to amaze her. Unlike Nami, Mayor Boodle was absolutely torn between how to feel. Should he be happy that someone still had a heart kind enough to help, or angry that a kid would sacrifice her life to help someone she had never met before? After a while of continuously opening his mouth and then opening it, the elderly mayor grumbled, "Thank you, kid, but I'm doing this on my own. This is my town, my responsibility, and it's my job to protect it." Luffy hummed, leaning her head to a side as if she was thinking about something, then perked up again. I refuse. You refuse what? Nami and Boodle said at the same time with the exact same confused tone. I refuse your refusal. We're going no matter what, and Mary also had some business with the buggy whatever guy. So I'm going. Luffy said with a determined tone. Sound as if her decision wouldn't change even if the world was to collapse on her because of her choice. Boodle looked infuriated, but thankful at the same time. Fine, he grumbled out, though he's smiling to his heart's content. If you die, I won't be of any responsibility of it. It's fine, old man. I won't die. I have a promise to keep, Luffy said with a bright grin. Luffy turned back towards the sea. I wonder what Mary and the guys are doing right now. Hope she's already reached the island shore. She smiled before grabbing onto her hat and jumping up ahead, shouting, "Let's go." Nami shook her head as she face-palmed exasperatedly. How come this idiot always gets whatever she wants when she wanted it? She's probably not even going to ask since, like the sadistic peacemaker said, Luffy logic cannot be fought against. Nami looked up again, smiled fondly as she followed her captain's example and following behind them both with a hyperventilating Mayor Boodle. The pirate captain hummed, hiding behind the shadow of curtains. He was sitting in a throne-like chair inside a circus tent which was heavily guarded by snarling and growling pirates. Well, let's just say that they were growling and snarling until Zoro and Kuina stepped into the scene. Mary stared at the shadow-covered figure ahead of him, his straight and expressionless face unchanging. Buggy stared back, his eyes slightly glinting in the light. He jumped up to his feet and shouted, "If you want to start an alliance with the great Buggy Slashily, bring your captain here. How dare you come into my territory and try to get an alliance with me without your leader directly contacting me? Well, as you can see, our captain is currently lost in your territory," Mary said as he pointed into town, a sly smile on his face. "You see that bird that came falling into town earlier? So, what of it? That bird was a government surveillance bird. It has a den mushi that is attached to its leg, which I've already caught on the way here." He rose up a baby surveillance den mushi with the Marine's mark embedded on its shell and showed it out to Buggy. "You don't want this to be exposed to the world, right? What you did to this town? You said you're proud of your bounty, but you want it to remain the same, don't you? That's why you fled to the weakest sea after your captain's execution. So, I want to make a deal with you, Buggy. When our captain returns, your crew and our crew will have a friendly face-off. I won't move one step in order to even everything out. If we win, you become our underlings. We'll train you into shape for the Grand Line and supply you with information needed to get through it safely. In return, you come to us whenever we need your help, and our treasurer, who would be coming here soon along with our captain, would be dealing with all the money problems." Buggy was visibly tense, but he still let a feral smile etch on his lips. The captain leaned forward slightly. "Then what do I get when I win?" "We'll give you all our money, a treasure map, and this den mushi." He held up the snail in his hand. Though people might think it's a wild bet, it's definitely not, since there is pretty much no chance of them losing this bet. And even if Buggy somehow magically wins, they won't have any drastic losses, other than facing the uncontrollable rage of their treasurer. After all, The Den Den Mushi Mary is holding is just something he stolen from one of Garp's ship. Buggy thought for a little while longer before grinning like a madman. He stood up from his throne and revealed himself to the crew. He wore an orange captain cape which matches his captain hat, had a red nose and wore clown-like makeup. His skin was pale and blue tassel-like hair hung from the two rims of his hat, which just make him look much more pathetic than he made out to be. He stepped towards the peacemaker and shook the man's hand with a grin nearly as smug as Zoro's smirk. "Pleasure working with you." "You too. Now, lock him up, men," Buggy ordered, pointing at Mary. "What?" Kuina and Zoro snarled. They were trying to stay silent and let Mary deal with everything, but this is getting out of hand. They're going to lock one of their nakama up? There's no way they'll let that happen. Kuina took fighting stance and tightened her grip on the Wado Ichimonji while Zoro obviously tried to kill them with his glare. And it actually might be working for that matter. "Don't get so flashy, kids," Buggy said as he raised up his hand. "We're just following the rules. What if something bad happens to you all and your peacemaker decided to make a move?" "He's right," Mary said with a nod and a smirk. Zoro and Kuina relaxed and took a step back. "He has a plan. Better safe than sorry, isn't that right?" "Good, now that we've come to an agreement, tie him up." He barked again and a few men came scrambling in with ropes and a huge iron cage. About 10 minutes later, the silver-haired peacemaker was wrapped up and boxed like a present. And that was spoken quite literally, for your information. Mary sat in the middle of the cage, which was decorated with long strips of multiple colored ribbons, and to add to that, his ropes were also wrapped in a huge bow with glitters. Mary himself was also quite decorated, with a very horrible scowl, that is. "Why is there a bow? And what's with the ribbon?" Zoro questioned with an eyebrow raised, while his partner was covering her mouth in an attempt to stop laughing. "For flashy reasons," Buggy said proudly, his arms crossed over his chest as he looked up with a reminiscing look. "Foo-ha-ha-ha-ha," Kuina blurted out, not even attempting to hide her laughter anymore. She pointed at Mary and said through snorts and laughter, "Mary, you look pathetic." "Why, thank you for the compliment," the peacemaker said with a flat glare, his eye twitching uncontrollably. "When this is all over, I'll remind myself to give all of you appropriate punishments." That was when Kuina and Zoro both physically paled and backed away quietly. They both turned to their back and latched onto the railing, mumbling out through sighs. "God bless you, Luffy, for the sooner you return, the less the chance of Mary murdering us all with his anger." Buggy's crew members' jaws hung. "Is he that dangerous?" "You'll never know, unless you experience it yourself," Zoro said with a sorrowful look that he probably had never worn before. He shuddered as he remembered the tortuous experience he faced under Mary's wrath. The entire crew turned towards their boss with pleading expressions, rivers of tears flowing out from their eyes. "Captain Buggy." "I'm not freeing him," Buggy said in a stern tone. "That's breaking the deal's conditions." "Bugggyyyy," a loud voice screamed from below, catching all of the clown-themed pirates' attention. They made a dash for the railing and stared down at the individual shouting her head off below. She was a young girl who was in her late teens. She was relatively small and lanky for her age group, adorned with a straw hat, bright yellow tank top and denim shorts with furry rims. She had very short, messy jet black hair and a scar under her left eye. Oh, and let's not forget the sneer she had on her lips. The orange hair girl following her had a cocky smile on her lips, but she was no less angry than the girl before. She wore a blue-colored unbuttoned shirt with a striped bikini top underneath and a pair of knee-length trousers. She held a metallic bow staff and her bright neon hair was tied up into a ponytail. And let's just say that if looks could kill, then the Buggy pirates would have died 3,000 times over. The first girl, who was Luffy, carried herself with pride as she pointed towards the building and straight towards the opposing pirates. "Come down here, Buggy, I won't forgive you for what you did to this town until you get a beating." With her hat shadowing a part of her face, Luffy gave of an intimidating air that had made multiple of the Buggy pirates back away. She flung her arms slightly and the sound of something colliding with the building's roof could be heard. The clown-themed pirate crew whipped their head around to see one of their nakama, Moji, and his pet, Richie, flat on the ground, unmoving and bloodied. "What did she sew to Moji?" One of the pirates screeched, his hand pulling down his own face on either shock or fear, or maybe both. He was one of our most powerful men and he just crushed him like this? I don't think this is going to be a good idea to challenge them like this. Another man cowered, backing away profusely from the other crew. They had to deal with someone as powerful Luffy, and there was also Zoro and Kuina, who are known across the sea as one of the strongest swordsmen. How could they possibly win? If any of you dare to back away right now, I'll deal with you guys myself. Now prepare the buggy balls. Buggy roared, pointing at the cannon to his left, and all of the men scrambled towards the object. They prepared the cannon and dropped in a red cannonball. This caught the Windblade duo's attention. One of the men ordered, "Prepare to fire." "The game's about to start," Mary said with a smug grin, leaning back against his cage's bars. If his hands were free, he would probably be crossing his arms. He turned to the swordsman duo and said, "You two better return to Luffy's side." "Sure thing," they both said dismissively before charging towards the cannon, swords in their grip. In a blink of an eye, the cannon was reduced into multiple metal rings, looking like pieces. The duo then, after destroying the cannon, hopped off the building and landed next to Luffy, unscathed. They sliced the cannon to pieces. One of the men screeched, "We've lost our firepower. That's crazy. They just jumped off a 5-floor building and they don't even seem injured." "Monsters. They're monsters," the buggy pirates screamed in panic. Running around, frantic. They know they're not going to win. Mary sat in his place, chuckling at the scene. It was interesting to see Buggy's face when he realized that he was going to lose this bet. Buggy the clown, himself, was staring jaw slack at the scene, dumb-stricken with snot hanging from his nostril. He shook his head and ran to the railing. "Why you? You used hockey." He pointed at both Kuina and Zoro, legs shaking wildly. He had thought he could win the bet with his Bara Bara no Mi's powers, but now that he knew they had hockey, all of his chances were gone. "So?" Zoro looked up, eyebrow raised. There was a moment of silence before all of the buggy pirates were on their knees. They bowed so low that their noses were in contact with the ground. They all pleaded, "We surrender." "Oi, I haven't agreed on this yet," Buggy shouted at his men. "Buggy-sama," they turned to their boss with tearful eyes and pouts. "We don't want to die." "You're not going to," Mary said with a yawn. "Now that you've surrendered, you're all part of our alliance. We won't kill you." "I'm not part of your alliance yet. Come on, Kabaji. Let's give these guys a taste of our power," Buggy shouted before flying down the building. Then, a shadow flew through the air and landed in front of the Straw Hat. He had long hair which covered parts of his face while the other half of his head was closed-shaved. He wore a long scarf, open sleeveless vest and baggy pants. The oddest thing was that he was balancing atop of a unicycle. He twirled around with his sword scraping the ground, shouting, "Kyokugi, Yukamori Satsujin Jikin." And from his twirling, he created a gigantic smokescreen. "Bara Bara," Buggy shouted in the smoke. "Evasion. He's running away." All of the remaining pirates shouted comically, their jaws hitting the ground. "I won't let you get away," Luffy shouted. She rested a palm on her bicep and reeled back, letting her arm stretch at least 10 meters backwards. "Gomu Gomu no," she announced as she stepped forward. The fist snapped forward, breaking through the air. "Pistol." The fist traveled into the dust, and a sound of a jaw breaking could be heard. Buggy broke free from the cloud of dust and slammed into one of the house's walls, breaking it into rubbles. Kabaji, in contrary to his captain, was praying next to his crewmates, knees on the ground and begging to join the crew. "We surrender," they chanted. It was a usual day in the Orange Town. The citizens had returned to their homes, seeing that the pirates who were occupying the roof of one of the bars had been defeated. Oh wait, it was one of the unusual days in the Orange Town. The citizens had returned to their homes after seeing a giant explosion in town only to find an unconscious Buggy and their mayor in the similar state. They went rampage and tried to attack the people who had injured their leader only to find the said pirates fixing their homes, the same homes which they had destroyed to splinters only a few days ago. What was happening? Things just got weirder when a young man in a purple coat and matching bowler hat, who claims to be a pirate, came over and apologized to them profusely and also gave them a decent amount of money to supply themselves for the next few weeks. A few hours after all the oddities had happened, their beloved mayor had woken up again and explained to them what had happened. The Straw Hat Pirates, as they had claimed themselves to be, had, under the whim of the mayor himself, took down the Buggy Pirates and protected the town. They had also guaranteed that Buggy will not cause any more harm to the town now that he is the captain's, Luffy's, subordinate. After that, they insisted on having a party to celebrate their heroes but were denied by the pirates who said they are in urgent times and had to leave. By the time the collateral damages were all fixed, it was night. The temporary ship of the Straw Hats, Miss Love's Duck, came to take them off, with the Buggy Pirates following closely behind with their own big top. They better come back to visit us when Luffy becomes Pirate Queen. Mayor Boodle grumbled with a fond grin. I'm sure they will. And if that time comes, they won't be able to deny the party. The town's doctor said, hands in his pockets. He had ended up having to tend Buggy, which infuriated him to no end, but in return he was promised by Mary that when they return they will accept any offer from the town. What a weird band of pirates. I wonder how they'll survive in the Grand Line, Mayor Boodle said with a hearty laugh before heading off into the once again calming town. Unknown to the events happening on the ship sailing away from their docks. On the said ship, a certain blue-haired, red-nosed captain was thrown off the ship by an infuriated peacemaker. It was all back to normal, with their usual crazy life, crazy world. Someone go get the clown, Mary said with a grunt as he sat down on his usual beach bench, book already in his hand and a cup of tea next to him. A few of the men dived into the sea to help their drowning captain. After Buggy was revived, he led a wrath on Mary only to be ignored and called clown again. Listen, you clown. I won't tolerate being treated like a present wrapped up in bows and such. It ruins my pride. I'm sure you would have even tried to kill someone who tried to ruin your pride too. Now that I'm done with lecturing you, we have to get to more important matters, such as the alliance. Stop calling me clown. It's an insult on my nose, you bastard, Buggy screeched. Go sue the Marines for giving the bounty poster that says, Buggy the Clown, clown. Mary said dismissively. Now this is your end of the deal, so listen. We won't visibly show any sign of ownership over your crew, but if you do something that even remotely shows that you are betraying us, you'll have to deal with me and Luffy. Do I have myself clear? The clown-themed pirates nodded. The peacemaker continued. We'll part at the Twin Capes and you're allowed to go anywhere you want as long as you promise to come to our side whenever we call for you. We'll also take a part of your monthly income, as our permanent treasurer had stated, and in return, we'll supply you with treasure maps. So that said, you'll be our treasure hunting department. Do you agree with that? They all nodded. Buggy even looked quite excited for it. But, you're no longer allowed to attack towns and pillage from innocent citizens. Only fight people when they took the initiative, that's this crew's motto. If you break that rule, I'll be sure to deal with you properly. Shivers ran down their spine as the voice as cold as the seventh layer of hell resonated through their minds. We'll also train your body and mind in this short period of time enough in order for you to survive the Grand Line unscathed. Are we clear? The crew nodded again. Now, soon, our other captain will return with her subordinates. You'll all get along and tell her that the training would start tomorrow morning. Don't wake up late and set your clock to 5 a.m. They all nodded again and Mary smiled warmly. Now that we're clear on that matter, return to your posts and get a good rest. They all gaped at the man for a moment before Richie raised his paw. He growled something that most people couldn't understand. Luffy looked down from her special seat, shouting. He said, "What's the catch?" "The catch to what?" Mary asked innocently. "To your sudden nice demeanor," the entire extended crew asked. "Oh, I just thought that you'll need some calm time before you won't even be able to feel comfortable breathing anymore," Mary said with the same innocent smile, though, through the eyes more like a grin of a devil towards its victim. They all shuddered uncontrollably. Now, they won't even be able to sleep peacefully anymore without dreaming about what horrible fate they would face tomorrow. "Ah, I feel lucky that I won't have to face all of that tomorrow," Zoro said with the back of his head resting on his palm, leaning against the railing as if he was getting ready for a nap. Kuina nodded along with him. She didn't want to experience it either. It sounded even worse than her father's, Koshiro-sensei's, hockey training. Luffy laughed heartily. "What are you two talking about? You're doing the endurance training too. And then we'll also do the defense and attack training. I'm doing it too. It's good practice, ya know." She suddenly looked around as if she was searching for someone. "Wait, where's Nami?" "She ran," Kuina said, pointing at the figure attempting to dive into the water with a bag of gold. How she planned to swim with such heavy object weighing her down, God knows. After all, man could become blinded by money. And Nami could become even blinder than that. "Nami!" the entire crew shouted, only to get a sheepish chuckle in return. By the time Alvida had returned with her henchmen, she was an entirely different person. Her messy, frizzy black hair had now turned slick, shiny and wavy like ebony silk. Her body was now twice as tall and 4 times as thin, and she was very unstable, very unstable. And this is spoken both physically and mentally. She would slip and fall flat on her face every 5 seconds, and instead of getting hurt, she just slid it off uncontrollably. Alvida also would show off her new body in this second only to switch to crying about being complimented in the next, and in the end, she concluded with having a constant internal fight with herself. So, truly spoken, everyone in the original crew thought it was hilarious. Some of them, such as Mary, Kuina and Nami, would silently chuckle to themselves, while others via Zoro and Luffy would get a good laugh from it as soon as they could. It was then that the extended crew woke up, getting, mentally, ready for their training. One of them shouted, "It's a Bashoujo," pointing at the woman ahead of them. Alvida, who had heard what they had said, blushed, turned and pointed at them shouting, "Who is the prettiest woman on the seas?" "You are." All the man who had seen the female captain's face said, with drool dripping from their mouths and hearts in their eyes. She squealed in happiness before literally collapsing on the ground with a happiness overdrive, or maybe she just tripped. Mary grumbled aloud, "Go wake the others up. We're getting ready for the training, and just so you know, that prettiest woman on the seas looked like this before she ate her devil's fruit," he said as he showed a picture of the previous Alvida, and the few present men paled immediately. "How dare you do that to me?" she shouted, snatching the picture from him. He shrugged before grinning at the woman slightly. "You wouldn't want to get cocky now, would you? Wait until you beat Hancock to claim the title." "Hancock?" she questioned. Nami spoke up through a yawn. "Labeled the prettiest woman on the 5 seas. Her beauty is natural, by the way, unlike yours. 1,000 men swoon over her only to become statues at her disposal. Quite literally even." "What does that mean?" Alvida asked, looking as dumbfounded as she was before. "She has a devil's fruit ability," Luffy shouted from her special seat. "Why are you all up so early?" Alvida asked again, clinging onto the railing for better balance, though she was still slipping like she was standing on oiled ground. "Today's training day," Mary said blandly. "Training day?" Alvida screeched, only to lose her grip and fall flat on the ground again. She tried to steady herself on her mace before continuing her screaming. "Who's doing the training then?" "Mary," the others said sorrowfully, making the female captain turn as white as a sheet. She slipped again before collapsing on the ground, motionless but still slipping. "It's okay, Alvida, I've already came up with a perfect training session for you," Mary said with a smile. "And, as a memorandum, you could keep that picture of your former self. I've already photocopied it and asked Kodo to give it out to everyone of the ship. Preparations for your welcoming party, you know?" "Cruel," the other members, not including the in state of depression Alvida, said with a sweat drop rolling down the back of their head. A few hours later, the only remaining people who were standing was Luffy, Zoro, Kuina, Mary and Alvida. All the other crew members were on the floor, feeling too tired to even move a finger. Nope, make that too tired to even breathe properly. Alvida was standing for a different reason. She stood on one foot while all of her other limbs were carrying tall stacks of plates. She was struggling. "If you break any of those plates, I'll make sure to ask Nami to add their cost into your cosmetic fees," Mary reminded her, using a small napkin to wipe away the sweat beads he gained from one of the running exercise. "That is if she wakes up anytime soon." He pointed towards the redhead who was on the ground and grumbling something not understandable under her breath. "Torture," Alvida grumbled out under her breath, trying to keep her powers from activating. Zoro, who was already back in his napping position, let out a yawn before asking, "Do these trainings continue every day from now until Logatown?" "Of course," Luffy shouted from her seat. "If I'm going to have more Nakama, I'm going to make sure they could all survive. And, after all those months, I was starting to miss Mary's training. Fighting East Blue pirates are too easy. The crew members who were still conscious let out a loud, simultaneous sigh, and Alvida just took that exact moment to slip and fell flat on her face, breaking 2 plates before Mary caught the others off from the air. "You let those to fall while you could have caught it," Alvida said with her face still in the ground. "Punishment, punishment," Mary said with a smile, making Zoro, Kuina and Luffy chuckle. It was another normal day in the adventures of the renewed Straw Hat crew. It was a normal day indeed. Normal day my ass. The entire extended crew, who was trying their best to even breathe, said to my face, "Wait, what?" Omake Buggy bargained Nami. "So, have you had the talk with Mary?" Buggy. "Yeah, I couldn't believe he threw me off the ship." Nami. "I know right?" Chuckling Buggy. "So, you're the flashy treasurer?" Nami. "Yep. Nice to meet you, I'm Nami. I like Mikan and money." Showing of an "okay" sign with her finger while winking. Buggy. "Yeah, you too. So, what do you want to discuss about?" Nami. "Money issues of course." Buggy raises his eyebrows. Nami. "Let's get straight to the point, shall we? The scale is 2 to 8. Buggy. "Nice deal, we get 8, you get 2, right?" Nami. Chuckles. No, I think you're misunderstanding something here. We get 8. Translation. I get 8, and you get 2. Buggy. What do you mean, you flashy bastard?" Nami. "So you agree with the deal?" Wink wink Buggy. "No way in hell." Nami. "How about 1 to 9? Buggy. "Only if we get 9 Nami." "Okay, you'll get 1 said in a tone of finality. Buggy. "Are you deaf?" Nami. "Then what do you want, 0.5, 9.5? Buggy. "No, Nami." "Then that's the final deal Buggy, at least 5 to 5. Nami. "In your dreams Buggy, 4 to 6. Nami. "No Buggy. How about?" Nami. Raises a hand at his face. "We also want your Grand Line map." Buggy. "Damn you all, you flashy bastards, at least let it be 3 to 7. Nami. "Aren't you getting greedy here?" Scowl Buggy. "Arg," jumped off the ship's railing. Mary. "Nice." Looked overboard, whistling impressively. He jumped off it willingly. Maybe giving you job as treasurer was a right choice after all. Nami. "Aren't you darn right? Now give me my pay," showed out her palm. Mary. "You don't have a pay, but I'll let you have the crew's money. The scale's 0.5, 9.5. Nami. "How generous of you, Mary, me 9.5? Then I will accept your offer willingly." Mary. "Have a nice time shopping with 5% of the crew's money." Evil smirk. Nami. "Damn it, come back here, you," the next morning. Alvida. "How did it go with Nami?" Buggy. "I got 10% of the profit." Alvida. "Good for you. I got 0.1%. Island of the exotic. Land ahoy," one of Alvida's crewmates shouted with vigor. It's had only been 2 days since they left the Organ Islands and they had already found a new place to rest it. It was either their blessing or cursing. It was only the first day of Mary's hellish bootcamp treatment and no one could feel their muscles any longer. Getting it to twitch was already fortunate enough. Now that they were able to reach an island, the dangers they might have to face was most likely going to be treated like sandbags for them to train with anyways, which was obviously not what they would want. Mary stood at the railing of the big top, eyes squinting at the island which was rapidly increasing in size. He turned and mumbled to Nami, "It's unoccupied. There are some animals there but they are all rather docile. We'll drop on there and take a break." With a nod, Nami turned and screamed loudly, 10 degrees to starboard, raise the sails, no slacking off. The crew grunted, each still trying to revitalize from their training. Buggy managed to sit up slightly. "Look who's telling us to stop slacking off. You're not doing anything either," he justified weakly. "You're half dead and are still willing to argue?" the silver-haired peacemaker whispered under his breath, a cold grin surfacing on his thin cherry lips. "It seems you still have much energy to waste, don't you, clown?" Suddenly, Buggy's face turned almost as blue as his own hair. Stuttering like a broken record, he screeched frightfully, No, I'm not. I'm dying, no energy, I'm dead." Then, frantically, he shouted to his lackeys, "What are you slummers doing? Do you think we have forever? Get your asses moving, you useless mess." His voice shook as he shouted up at top of his lungs, nostrils flaring. On the companion ship, which was towed along the big top, Miss Love's duck had also become bustling with activity. The men were scrambling around, pulling strings and unraveling ropes. Meanwhile, their captain was in a crisis of whether the mastery of her powers is more important than her cosmetic budgets. It had been an obviously grueling decision to make. She had been sitting in the same position for more than 4 hours, staring blankly at the wall, looking like a half-dead entity. Occasionally, she would let out long streams of inaudible words which even her comrade couldn't fathom. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Kuina pondered, tying up her hair and draping on her yukata above the black tank top and shorts. Then, wrapping the blue belt around her waist and inserting her sword into its place by her side, she turned to Zoro. The swordsman, like usual, leaned against the wall with his elbow resting on his 3 swords protectively. "I'm sure she'll be back to her old self soon enough," Luffy answered instead of Zoro, legs swinging as she sat on the ledge of the ship's cabin roof. She grinned as glanced towards the island, looking forward to her new adventure. Even though East Blue wasn't as mighty and awe-inspiring as the Grand Line, it was still the place where she recruited most of her nakama, so she felt rather excited and curious of who was next in line. It was not until an hour later that they dropped their anchors and landed on the sandy beach of the abandoned island. The pirates took their time stretching and breathing in the earthy air of dry land, relaxing themselves and bracing for the potential problems ahead of them. Mary hopped down from the deck of the big top, landing with a light thud, blowing the sand under his feet into the air. Showing his palm, he helped Nami down the rope ladder the buggy pirates had prepared. Then, soon after, Zoro, Luffy and Kuina followed suit, all landing gracefully on the beach. Looking around for a moment, Luffy pondered, "Where's Alvida?" It was at that exact moment that a scream could be heard. They all turned to see the female captain on her bum, sliding slightly on the sand as she groaned painfully. "Damn these powers," she cursed, trying to stand up like a newborn goat, legs clattering together. Looking around, there was nothing much to see, mainly just lush green shrubs of leaves, sand and a few mountains further away. It was quite a simplistic and generic island in the East Blue. Nothing much could be said about the little place. Kuina gave a glance and said dejectedly, "Nothing much to see here, isn't there? After all, it is an unpopulated island," Nami stated as she opened up her map. "I'll scale the coast to make a map." She noticed Mary as her clicked her satchel open, taking out a pen and a compass. Mary nodded in reply. "There might be some problems around here, so take Kuina and Zoro with you. They seemed quite bored anyways." "Sure, we'll be back in 2 to 3 hours I predict," Nami said, checking her watch. "I'll give a warning if anything happens," Mary assured. After waving them goodbye and dismissing the trio, looking at their back disappear into the leaves, Luffy and him strolled back to the coast where all the extended crew members were gathered. She was rather dejected at how there didn't seem like anything interesting was happening. Luffy had noticed how they had all grouped together, looking exceptionally frightened at the sight of something up ahead. It was as if they had seen a ghost or monster of some kind. "What's going on?" Luffy questioned, her head tilted aside. Startled, the crew jumped into the air, eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. "CC Captain," they screeched in unison with a mix of relief and caution, and Mary, they said dejectedly and dropped their guards. "What's wrong with this difference in treatment?" Mary asked himself rhetorically. They continued, teeth chattering. "There's a ghost," they said, pointing ahead at the whatever hybrid animal that was staring at them from the distance. It was something similar to a cross between a fox and a cock, with fur covering its body but also donning a colorful feathered tail. "That fox chicken thing's a ghost," Luffy said, pointing at the ghost. She had seen many exotic animals in the world, so the fox-chicken hybrid didn't bother her much. "Would you call that anyway? A ficken?" "Don't ask stupid questions, Luffy," Mary said, narrowing his eyes, as he rested his hand on his rapier. "I'm the guardian of this forest. I command you all to depart from this place and leave the animals alone," a voice commanded loudly. "Something was shot at us when we didn't listen. It's a ghost," the crew members explained, pointing at the ground. Mary walked over and poked his hand into the ruptured earth. Then slowly, he clawed out a round metallic bullet. Luffy had already gone ahead and walked towards the direction of the fox-chicken hybrid. Then, with her palm, She brushed a bush aside, a bush revealing a gun. Further ahead, there was something which looked rather similar to a bush in a typical treasure box. Either way, there was almost nothing typical about this situation. Let's simplify this together. A bush, in a treasure box, which could talk and has a gun, threatened to punish them all if they do not leave the island. Well, this isn't the weirdest thing we've encountered, right? Mary said as he picked up this gun. Then, with a click, he reloaded it and pointed it towards the bush in the treasure box with an evil smile on his face. With a menacingly commanding tone he interrogated, "Who are you and what do you want with our crew?" He sounded so calm it gave the crew members themselves shivers. Suddenly, a scream erupted in the air and the box magically grew 2 stubby feet and began to sprint away at astonishing speed. "It's moving!" the crew exclaimed, staring at the object running away from them. Then suddenly, the box fell over with a painful thud and a deep yelp. "It fell!" they exclaimed again while Luffy observed it amusingly and Mary stared at it emotionlessly. "Stop staring and pick me up already!" the box screamed after a few moments of awkward silence. The crew came up and looked at the object with curiosity. "It's a man! What else could it be?" Mary sighed, suddenly drowned with a sense of regret for taking in such a walking comedy show. "This island is really bland," Nami said with a sigh, already finished with her sketch of the island. She stashed away the sheets of sketches, her compasses and tools before glancing around dejectedly. "It's also very small. Well, not much to expect around here." "Are you done already?" Kuina asked, leaning on Nami's shoulder intimately. They seemed to have developed a rather close relationship after a few days of traveling together and being roommates. Nami nodded in response, glancing around with a quirked eyebrow. Kuina pursed her lip and asked probingly, "Don't ask me where Zoro is. I don't know either. Now that you're done with your work, I'll go look for him. I'm sure you know how to go back to Luffy-san and Mary-san, right?" "Does this happen often?" the navigator asked awkwardly. "More often than you can imagine," Kuina answered dismissively with a sense of irritation before hopping off into the forest after giving Nami a slight wave. Giving one last glance back at where the swordswoman had vanished off to, Nami also began her trip back to the crew. Kuina dashed through the forest like a lightning bolt, her observation haki spreading in all directions, observing all of the movements. Soon, she located Zoro, who was lying on a coast on the south side of the island. She didn't know how he managed to get all the way there, but no one really ever knows, so she didn't question much. Walking into the sandy beach, she dropped her speed, ignoring all the mutated animals curiously peeking at the swordsman. Finding her spot naturally next to Zoro, Kuina laxly leaned back and exhaled lightly. "Having a nice time?" "There's a large ship approaching from this direction," Zoro replied, eyes still closed. "Should I report to Luffy-san?" Kuina asked, still rather light-hearted as she grinned calmingly. She looked forward, as if she was mentally marking the dot on the horizon her target. "They aren't strong, we can probably deal with them ourselves." "Well, what if they're not here for trouble?" Kuina asked. "Then there's no need for us to report to Luffy, right?" Zoro reasoned, slightly opening his eyes and glancing at Kuina with his sharp gaze. She shrugged, closing her eyes as she hummed slightly. Though her observation wasn't absolutely high level, it was enough for her to encase the entire island with her powers. She sent a mental warning to Luffy and Mary in case anything important happens in her area. Seconds later, Mary's figure appeared on the sea surface ahead of them. His blue eyes flickered as he whipped around, focusing on the ship approaching with great speed. He turned around after a few minutes, saying with his slightly monotonous voice, "Luffy and I will come over when we're done over there. Notice Luffy when they arrive on the shore." Kuina nodded while Zoro exuded an agreeing grunt and Mary dissipated bad into a puddle of seawater. "Oh, it's such a sad story," Buggy and his crew member cried Rivers, hugging each other in consolation, along with some of Alvida's own crew members. "A man kept from his treasure, desperately protecting it from people who came after them. You're a great pirate, box guy," Buggy croaked. "How stupid," Nami said, nose wrinkling. She had just came back from her mapping session, only to encounter the group of pirates listening to a man with a large afro who was also oddly fitted into a treasure box. They sat in a large circle, almost covering up the entire small blank field. He told tales of treasures and maps and how he was trapped here, on this abandoned island, in a box. She wasn't really interested in the stories, of course, but rather her eyes glittered when the word treasure was echoed. Old man, we'll get your treasure for you, Luffy exclaimed excitedly. She felt rather a sense of pity for the man but was glad to help either way. And also, if she was able to help a man accomplish his dreams she wouldn't mind doing so. My name is Gaiman. The man in the box exclaimed in helplessness, but a tinge of gratitude apparent in his voice. But then, he turned around and indicated the plateau near the center of the islands. He spoke with resignation, but I don't think you can help me. It's all the way up that mountain. Are you willing to climb it for a man who has no future like me? Never mind that. First let's get your treasure, the young female captain insisted, swinging her arms around with enthusiasm. Don't try to convince her, it won't ever work, Nami said exasperatedly as she began to head in the direction of the plateau, already immune to the erratic captain and her similarly nonsensical crew. Gaiman soon followed her, not bothering to question anymore as he waddled forward, his treasure chest rocking side to side. The rest of the crew followed suit, mobilizing their army through the forest. It seems that Buggy's crew, though have only spent a night with the Straw Hats, had unconsciously felt they belonged to them and was rather obedient. Most of them had an epiphany, in which they realized how pirating is not necessarily pillaging and destroying. It only took less than 10 minutes for them all to gather at the foot of the mountain. It was rather red and muddy but reached the height of about 20 to 30 meters tall. It was a short climb, rather the bothersome thing was how steep the mountain was. To a normal person it would be quite a rough climb but to Luffy it was as easy as stepping over a rock. This'll be easy, she mumbled to herself, coiling back before stretching her hands up with amazing speed. Gaiman's eyes almost fell straight out of their sockets when the sight played before him. He was flabbergasted as his mouth flapped like a broken toy. He managed to mumble out, what kind of? It's a devil's fruit. Nami explained casually. We have 4 users in our crew already. There's our white-haired peacemaker, Mary, with his umi no mi. The tassel-haired clown over there has the bara no mi and the last one is the prideful beauty who keeps having to lean on other people, literally, who has the sub no mi. And our captain, that girl over there, has the gomu no mi. She listed like she was reading of a shopping list. The boxed man was even more startled. I've been a pirate for a long time, and have heard of many tales about the devil fruits. But this is the first time I've seen one with my own eyes, not even mentioning 4 of them at the same time. And I'll be honest, I don't think anything can be weird anymore after working as a navigator for this crew. Nami said with exasperation, silently concluding that she'd lose her sanity soon enough if she continued staying in this pirate crew. Luffy had already managed to shoot herself onto the top of the mountain. But to everyone's curiosity, there had been no response from the young captain. Mary, however, had been rather silent with a look of contemplation and slight traces of dread on his face. He had received a message from his sister and was pondering on how to break the news to the man trapped in the treasure box. But before Mary could say anything, Luffy had already peeked out from the edge of the plateau, hands holding a treasure chest in her arms. She shouted, "There really are treasure chests up here. There are 5 of them up here." An expression of ecstasy appeared on Gaiman's face as he replied, "That's great, drop them down, but don't hit us," he cackled. "No way," Luffy said with a grin, sticking her tongue out in distaste. This left most of the crew shocked. Nami glowered, "Luffy, don't mess around. I know we're all tempted by the treasure but you can't possibly try to take all of them for yourself. Stop kidding around." "Yeah, Captain," Kodo exclaimed, though feeling something rather fishy about what was happening. "Damned you rubber idiot. You can't hoard the treasure to yourself. The man found his treasure. You've got to give him the credit," Buggy screeched, feeling sympathy for Gaiman as a fellow treasure hunter. "Only slightly though." The other crew member dissatisfaction. "It's okay you guys. Forget about it. It's okay if she doesn't want to drop them," Gaiman said dejectedly, his face darkening. He looked up, tears filled his eyes as he mumbled, "You're a good person." "What are you saying?" the rest of the screamed, absolutely confused of the events playing before them. Gaiman continued, eyes filled despair and melancholy, "I've thought of the possibility before, but have convinced myself opposite. The treasure chests are empty, aren't they?" Luffy silently nodded. The man, who had waited for 20 years, let his tears pour down his face like a waterfall. He cried into his palms as the crew stared at him with great pity. There was nothing worse than knowing you have wasted 20 years of your life on an empty dream. So the treasure did exist. Rather, someone had come and taken them away before I even found the map. The air was solemn, everyone kept quiet and gave the man space, letting him take in the devastating truth. It was a moment after that Luffy let out a large laugh. It's okay, Asen. Fortunately, we came to you pretty early. Yes, it would have been quite horrible if we left you to guard empty chests for the next few decades and leave you to rot in this lonely island. Mary spoke with his calming voice, smiling slightly. Luffy continued joyfully, don't worry. There's still the great treasure of One Piece ahead of us. The adventures of the Grand Line and the great tales to be heard. Won't you join us, Asen? Are you inviting me? Gaiman asked, eyes shining with wonder as he thought of the adventures which might be waiting in stall of him. Tears of joy and gratitude rolled down his cheeks as he smiled. It has been so long since he had heard those words of wonder. Then, he pondered for a moment before sighing slightly. He wiped away his tears and looked up with resolution. Sorry, kid, but I don't think I'll go with you. I have my job as the guardian of the forest. These rare animals depend on me. Many people had come and go on this island to gather my exotic animals to sell them for money. I need to protect them. You're a rare and exotic animal too, Asen, so take care of yourself. Luffy exclaimed from above, grinning goofily. Shut it, he screeched in reply, and the crew chuckled joyfully, seeing as the heavy atmosphere had been lifted. The rubber female captain jumped down from the top of the plateau and grinned happily at the pirate trapped in the treasure box. Gaiman continued, I hope to hear news of your crew coming on all the way from Grand Line. I feel like you group of misfits are destined for greatness. But be careful, I've seen many people return from the Grand Line, their face etched with the pain and despair of the cursed waters, the pirate's graveyard. His voice grew grim as he continued, his eyes narrowing in warning. Don't worry, Asen, I'll come visit you when I can, Luffy said joyfully. When I acquire One Piece, I'll bring some of it over to you and your animals. She. Oi, that treasure's mine, Buggy claimed loudly, swinging his arms around like an angry young child. The rest of the crew chuckled as Alvida managed to lose her grip on Koto and fell flat on her face, feeding herself a mouthful of sand. Mary smiled lightly at the heartwarming scene before he suddenly received a flare of power entering his hockey field. It seems that the unidentified ship has arrived to shore after a few hours of time. He walked through the crowd silently and rested a hand on Luffy's shoulder, and she turned around with a knowing look, nodding silently as if they were communicating through their eyes. She seemed to have also received the same signal from Zoro and Kuina and was also planning to head over. Well, something pretty cool's happening on the other side of the coast, so Mary and I'll go see what's up, Luffy reported to the crew as they seemingly celebrated the events which had just happened. You guys go ahead and enjoy yourselves. We'll return with Zoro and Kuina-san before long. Nami, Buggy and Alvida are in charge. Mary nodded in agreement before the two seemed to disappear into thin air, as if they had teleported away. The two appeared again on the coast only 2 seconds after, where Kuina and Zoro was resting their foot each respectively on two men wearing cat claws and a cow costume. One of them was very slim, with green hair, slanty feline eyes and claws, while the other was extremely rotund with round eyes and fangs. They were both struggling under the sword duo's feet helplessly. Mary and Luffy entered the scene silently. Luffy was rather numb to all the meet-up with pirates after experiencing so many of them trying to challenge her authority in her past life. She rather felt bored of them when knowing they were no one powerful or special. These people are? Mary asked, eyes them with an ice-cold gaze which almost dropped the air's degrees by 3 or 4 times. They called themselves Kuroniko pirates. When they arrived, we suggested they coexist with our crew on the island quietly and that we'll leave in a few hours, but they insisted on fighting us and threatened to steal our treasure while they're at it. Kuina explained, turning to Mary with a smile as bright as daylight. So we beat them to a pulp and called you over to see what you'll do with them. Luffy nodded while Mary remained emotionless and still. The young female captain suggested cheerfully, I'm bored and I don't really know how to deal with this, so how about we let our peacemaker deal with everything here? Zoro, Kuina. Let's return. I'm sure Buggy has gone to break out the rum and sake. Let's celebrate. She raised her hands up in excitement, feeling that she would rather have bonding time with her crewmates than deal with random strangers. The duo nodded before they all disappeared into the forest, leaving Mary behind with the pirates. He spared them a glance before speaking with a light but clear and dominating tone. "Who are you leaders?" "Es sir, please spare us," the thin one lying on the sand said with a quivering voice only to be stopped halfway by Mary's glare. "Answer the question." The men shivered. They knew not whether the man ahead of them was powerful or not, but the people who was his comrades certainly could beat them with a flick of their finger. If they didn't listen or answered, they'd be inviting death upon themselves. The slim pirate on the ground stood up, fully revealing his bony figure, which seemed as if it could be blown away by the wind. He spoke. "Sir, I'm the leader of our crew. My name is Sham." "Where's your actually leader and who is he?" Mary said with a glare which almost seemed it could see through minds, a small smile crawling onto his lips. Sham was quite shocked that the man ahead of him had managed to realize he was not the captain at first glance. He continued with a silent confidence brewing in his bowels. If he revealed how powerful his captain and vice-captain was to this silver-haired man, he would certainly be able to scare him. He smiled wilily. "Our captain is Kuro of 100 Plans, who we've come to assist at attacking the village which he is currently at. Our vice-captain is 12 Django, who is extremely adept at the art of controlling minds." Mary pondered for a moment, searching for the names in his mind. He remembered reading a news article 3 years ago mentioning a pirate of the name Kuro being hanged. He chuckled silently. For a man who had quitted on being a pirate once to summon his crew again, it must be rather important. He was claimed to be the second most intelligent man in East Blue. This made Mary almost laugh aloud. Nami would probably outsmart this man when it came to capturing money and treasure once she matured. Sham was rather taken aback when he saw that Mary was still as calm as ever and even smiled when he heard Sham's words. The peacemaker turned to the cat-like pirate and continued, "How about we make a deal? I'll not harm all of you if you allow our crew to follow you to your destination. And in that time, you must RNING to your leader about us and must absolutely obey us." Sham listened and thought about it deeply, weighing the pros and cons before nodded with a trace of doubt. This man is crafty, he thought. Who would make a deal of such low importance when wielding such powers? This person is brewing up a plan, something that will change their lives. For a moment, he felt as if the man ahead of was even more foxy and crafty than his own captain. And even harder to see through. But he discarded the thought, thinking it was ridiculous. Sham reached out, grasping Mary's hand in agreement to the deal. "We have a deal." Mary nodded, the playful smile still dancing on his lips. "Now, you'll all follow me back. Your ship will be brought next to ours, agree?" They all nodded as the men climbed off their ship, and joined Sham and Butchie down on the coast. Mary ushered them forward and showed them the direction. After they all entered the forest obediently, he glanced at the ship and with a wave of his hand sent it moving along the coast as if it was being blown away by a gust of wind. Silently, he continued behind the cat-eared pirates, eyeing them like a hawk. He reunited with Luffy and the others soon after. When they arrived, the crew had already set up a large bonfire as the sky turned dark in the dusks. None of the people, however, seemed surprised at the peacemaker's return with a large number of unknown people. Mary sat down in between Luffy and Nami, some a cup of tea and a book out of thin air, and leaving the Kuroniko pirates stumped in their place. They were expecting to meet with a glowering band of pirates, interrogating them and ordering them around. They'd even imagined being extorted off all their measly treasure. Sham was even sure that his deal would be backfired and he would be betrayed, but he would never imagine a large group of pirates dancing, singing and drinking around a large bonfire. "What are you few doing?" Mary asked without turning around. "I've asked you to accompany our group for the next day. Are you going to stand there and stare at thin air for the rest of the night? Join the party. We only have to keep each other company for a few hours, enjoy yourselves." She. "Have some sake," Luffy said, bite on her meat and throwing over a bottle of sake. "Do we really have to share alcohol with these people?" Zoro asked with a scowl. Kuina nudged him in the ribs and glared at him angrily, mouthing something. Zoro grumbled before reluctantly shutting up. Nami snickered before dousing herself with her own pint of beer. "Mary's planning something evil again, Luffy," she said teasingly. Luffy grinned largely in return. I was thirsting for an adventure anyways. This East Blue is rather boring me out. I want to go out and meet up with Ace and Sabo soon. Mary chuckled lightly, making almost the entire crew pause from their partying with the exotic animals and Gaiman. Their face wrinkled and paled like raisin. All of them, except for Luffy, who was used to Mary's lack of emotion and his occasional smiles or laughs, wore an expression of fright, worry and slight disgust, as if they'd seen something they'll never be able to unsee. Nami let out a loud gasp as she pointed towards Mary with a hand covering her lips. Mary. She paused conspicuously. You smiled and chuckled, with actual joy. "The world's going to fall," Buggy screamed, hands raising to the heaven while the rest of the crew freaked out, running amok frantically like headless chickens. The Kuroniko pirates glanced around completely flabbergasted. What the hell was wrong with this crew? They thought in unison. While Mary had to calm the urge to face Palm and force them into another hellish training session. The rest of the night was full of partying and singing as they say goodbye to Gaiman and prepare their supply for the next trip. The story of meeting and helping their next crewmate, however, would be a story told in another time.